Can you hear me now? Can you... You can hear me now? Yay! Good! Oh my gosh. I know exactly what happened. So, okay. Ah! What a lovely time. Okay, here's what happened. Context. I've been having issues... Turn my music down. I've been having issues with my little box, and I have to scream at it before stream every day in order for it to work. Oh, it might have messed this up too. Hang on. I have to check another setting now. No, I actually uninstalled the drivers and reinstalled them so I wouldn't have this problem. And I forgot that when I uninstalled the drivers, it took away my microphone because it goes through a mixer. So yeah, it totally just killed everything. One moment, I want mic on. Turn the microphone on. Use microphone. There we go. Okay. My model wasn't tracking. There we go. Woo! Yeah, no, it was, no, it's because I uninstalled the drivers that go to my mixer, and then when I reinstalled it, I forgot to double check it on OBS. And on OBS, I forgot to look at my mic settings. Whoops! It's fine. It's fine. It's fixed now. The ancient rite of screaming and hitting the box till it works, yeah. So it was to reset my game. But now it should be, in theory, fine. In theory. So sorry about that. Sorry for being muted. Yes, Sprinkle Bells, thank you very much. You're my best friend today. I anticipated this happening, so I have a do ready to go. Out of curiosity, did we hear anything with Do the Do, or did that not go through at all? All right, it's time. There you go. Didn't hear anything? Okay, I'll fix it. Hello Aurelia, good to see you. It's my birthday today. Well, happy birthday! And by the way, I got Legion of the Damn Sanguinius done. Oh, yes. Okay, join the Discord. If you haven't, post it there. Post it there and I will look at it probably after stream today. I got some stories to tell. I've got some stories to tell. Wait, let me do my intro. Greetings, Battle Brothers! It's me, Aurelia Tempris, Defender of the Golden Throne, Servant of Humanity. I'm sorry we had to switch up the schedule today. This was not part of the plan. But it's okay. It's okay. Hello, hello! So, let me take a quick sip of my dew. Yes, good evening. It is a jolly season. That's part of the reason. So I have some delegates that I am supposed to be meeting a little bit this week and next week for the Emperor. It's an extra little thing that I have to do on occasion. And I set aside the majority of next week, made my schedule very flexible so that I could hang out with the delegates. And I was informed very, very last minute that we are meeting tomorrow. And not at any of the times I set aside last week. So I was like, when everyone else says that they are available and they look to you, the last High Lord who needs to say yes, you kind of have to say yes. You have to say yes to that. So, unfortunate. So I apologize that we had to change the schedule this week. So I'm so sorry about that. Oh my gosh. The schedule shift is not supported on the codex. I know. It's not supported. I was displeased because I had set every time, like, they could have picked any day last week and I would have made it work. I mean, not last week, this week. I mean, no, next week. Ugh. They could have picked any day next week and I would have made it work. They were like, no, Aurelia, we would like to meet tomorrow, as in Friday. I'm like, oh, I guess that works. But yes, also, we have lots to talk about, which I'm disappointed because we have lots to talk about, and I want to get to Star Wars versus 40k, but there's lots of good stuff happening in the Warhammer universe. We have... it is confirmed by Henry Cavill himself that we are getting our Amazon Warhammer series. I am very excited. I'm a little nervous because I don't think everything... Some shows that Amazon makes are good. Other ones, not so much. My personal opinion. I won't get into which shows and all that stuff. So I'm a little nervous about Amazon. But, I trust Henry Cavill because he seems to be very devoted to the content and the lore. And I really want to see what he's up to. And I want to see him do some awesome things. And have I watched Secret Level? Yes, that's part of it too. That was part of it today. I actually watched it like 30 minutes before stream. Someone has informed Takahata 101 of your existence. Oh. Well, that's good to hear. I think he already knew about me. I did respond to his well, not respond. The Caiaphas Cain TTS short, he's Cain in that. And so I posted that on YouTube and he actually commented on my video. It was nuts. I wonder how that happened. Yeah, no, I figured wait, what? He's Leandros? Who? What? Oh, okay. I was like, what am I looking at? I was like confused with that conversation. Oh, Bard, thank you for giving the sub to Captain Leandros. And Cold Kinetic Heat, thank you so much for resubscribing. The Ranadandra is coming. I'm ready to paint more Phoenix Lords. Okay, it's gonna be fun. It's gonna be fun. No, but Takahata, he's at least aware. He doesn't have to know me. It's whatever. But he did comment on my YouTube video, and then I think he followed me on Twitter. I think he followed me on Twitter. So, and he voices Brother Santodes. Okay, I didn't know that one. In Henry we trust. In Henry we trust. What was I gonna say? Oh yes, I watched Secret Level. Today, and let me tell you, fantastic. Loved it. The fight scenes, ooh, love the fight scenes. Like, not a lot in terms of like not a lot of talking, but honestly, that was perfect. It said so much without saying many words. What's Secret Level? Secret Level is an Amazon like TV series. It's basically a bunch of shorts from different like sci-fi fantasy universes. So there's a Dungeons and Dragons one, there's a Ben 10, I think. There's a couple different ones, and Warhammer was one of the IPs that they explored. And so it was basically 15 minutes. It says 19, but it's 15 with the credits. It's 19. And hello, welcome to everyone who's hopping in. But was Is it? I think I'm confusing. Maybe not Ben 10. Sorry, it's something else. I'm sorry. Look, I just had to figure out how to unmute everything. You're gonna have to be patient with me. You're gonna be very patient with me. Mega Man. Sorry, Mega Man. I'm sorry. I didn't watch. You're right. It was Mega Man. Thank you. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Look, I meant Mega Man. I said Ben 10. I'm so sorry. Forgive me. Forgive me. So, yeah, but I did enjoy the Warhammer episode. Very, very good. It's only been out for 2 days, so I won't talk about it too much, but I loved it. The fight scenes, amazing. It was beautiful to look at. It gives me some hope for the Warhammer universe and how those shows are gonna go. Definitely a lot of hope. And Dino Fan, thank you so much for gifting a sub. Thank you. So, yeah, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it, and I can't wait. But yeah, I'm looking. We got spoiled. What was it? Tuesday. We got spoiled with so much stuff. Didn't they release new codex rules? They released the secret level episode, and then Henry Cavill posted about the Warhammer show. Tuesday was a very good day. 12 out of 10. That was the 10th, right? 12 out of 10? 12 out of 10. I wanted to go to sleep because it's 1 in the morning for me, but Warhammer versus Star Wars. Yeah, I'm so sorry. We had to switch it up last minute. I have to, there's some delegates that I have to deal with. It'll be fine, though. It'll be fine. We're at least getting this in. I was like, if I was gonna cut any content, we have to cut... We have to cut Alien Isolation. We have to. I'm sorry, it's not 10 out of 12, because I'm in America. America. It's 12 out of 10. 12-10. Are you the date girl? Cause dang, you're a 12 out of 10. Have I heard of a Warhammer Christmas song sung by the Orcs? No, I haven't. We'll have to go through all of those and all the stuff since now it's Sanguinala season. Cheesy pickup lines from Aurelia. Yeah, I didn't even come up with that one. I'm not that creative. I'm not that creative. Unexpected Riz? Oh my gosh, no, that was like 0 Riz. I have no Riz. Did I purchase the Sanguinius model from Joy Toy? Yes, I did. Yes, I am eagerly waiting. They said, I have to double check my email, but they said it would arrive sometime in mid-December. But I'm still waiting. So I need to check my email to see if they sent a tracking number or anything. Because I got the one, I ordered it, I think, through the Warhammer site. Because I also got a Sanguinius t-shirt with it, and I said, well, let's spend more money to get the Sanguinius t-shirt. I don't have any Sanguinius, like, merch. And I'm like, oh my gosh, if I could get a shirt, I'm gonna wear it for streams, because it's probably not a good idea if I wear it out of the house. Because how many... It's probably just not gonna be a good idea. I'm gonna out myself so fast. I'm just... At least 60% Riz. Why is there only 60%? It should be like 0%. Hopefully GW doesn't mess with the shirt. I hope not. I'm trying to remember what the shirt looks like. I just remember I was like, Sanguinius shirt sold. Absolutely sold. So I don't know if it's If it goes from Joy Toy to GW and then to me, that might be why it's taking longer. Oh, chat. Battle Brothers. I have... I wonder who that person decked out in Sanguinius merch could possibly be. Yeah, see, those are gonna be house shirts. I cannot wear them outside the house, unfortunately. But are you ready? I have a story. I have a psyker story that occurred that you guys... Maybe you won't be surprised, but you guys think that I just have, like, psyker moments, like, on stream. It's been really weird. Ever since I started streaming, these have become more and more frequent. Like, it's really bizarre. It's kind of weird because this used to not be a thing. Unless it was, like, with shows and stuff, but that was, like, standard. So I actually have 2 instances of this. So the other day, I was talking with my fellow custodians, and we were planning what we were going to do for lunch. Once we got off, for our break. So we were discussing what we wanted to do. I had to step away and do something else for the time. And I was thinking, you know what? We haven't gone to this place in a while. Like, this place, what do we want to call it? We'll call it Heretic Diner. How about that? I was like, we haven't been to Heretic Diner in a while. This is me by myself, just kind of thinking, like, we haven't been to Heretic Diner in a little bit. Maybe we should go back. It's been several months. So I come back. We have to do a quick little meeting for our replacements. And after our meeting, we didn't get a chance to talk during the meeting. And I said, hey, what if we went to Heretic Diner for lunch? And they said, Aurelia, did you look at your Vox messages? And I said, no, I was busy. I didn't look at my Vox messages. I opened up my Vox messages and it was like 10 minutes ago, like 10 minutes before the meeting. I had not been anywhere. I had not looked at my Vox messages, but they said, hey, do you want to go to Heretic Diner? And I guessed it. I had no idea that we were gonna do that. Like, I didn't even, I don't know, I surprised myself. I found it very funny because I was like, there's no way. And these particular custodians don't know I'm a psyker. So I had to play it cool. I had to play it super cool. I was like, oh my gosh, what are the odds? And I'm like, what the heck? That one was my most impressive one as of late. I did have another one where I was getting food for Sibling and I, and I was picking it up. And so I grabbed the food, and as I am like walking out and getting on my jet bike, I was like, you know what, maybe I should just check this. Maybe I should check to make sure it's right. And I was like, no, it's fine. I see everything in there. There's like 2 little boxes, there's fries, everything is in there. Well, I get to the place where Sibling and I are hanging out, and we open Sibling's meal, and like the meat on Sibling's sandwich, not even there. And I was like, oh my gosh, I should have looked. Like, I had this like weird feeling, and I don't normally think like, oh, I should check the food. They're right most of the time, so I don't care. But I was like, I should have checked. I had a sneaking sensation, and I didn't follow through. So now I'm gonna follow through every time I have that sense. Your power grows, Captain. My true form shall burn through. That's a little... I hope it doesn't burn too hard. I ordered a burger with just cheese and ketchup, and in place, a burger with no patty. That's the worst. Like, it's like, oh, it's okay if, like, you got pickles on there. Or something. Like, okay, like, you could always pull the pickles off, unless you're, like, deathly allergic to pickles. I'm not. But I was like, how do you forget the patty? That's like the most important part. You have sanguineous foresight? I mean, hopefully I don't get it from sanguineous, because that would be awkward. But yes, it's very similar. It's very, very similar. So, yeah. Oh, yeah. It's kind of weird. They've been happening more frequently now, and I'm like, this was not a thing. Talk about a wedding gift. I don't know how you give someone that kind of gift. Boss is a sanctioned custody sticker. Yes, it's a very special situation. As far as I'm aware, I'm the only one. It's a very special situation. I can't go into it. It's top secret. Check my throne page. Oh. Thank you for the super chat, by the way. I need to get like notifications on stream for throne stuff. Wait, didn't ring. What? Oh, thank you so much. I assume, was that you, Mr. Clean? Let me double check. It says anonymous, but I think, was that you, Mr. Clean? Thank you so much for the gift. I'm gonna get a Custodes shirt now. It's gonna be fantastic. Thank you, thank you. Let me pull. Do I have a picture of the shirt? Custodes. See, this is another shirt I can only wear at home. Did I delete it? I might have deleted it. I deleted the photo. Ah. It's really cool. Hang on, I'm gonna show you. It was anonymous, but it was Dow. Oh! Thank you. Okay, I was just making sure. Your names from the YouTube to Discord is, it's confusing for me sometimes, so I apologize. I'm like, I don't always right away. I'm like, oh, that's the same person. Let me find the shirt. I'm sorry, I gotta show it to you. I saw it. I didn't know they had Custodes shirts. Well, they have cool shirts. I want to save. Can I save the image? I want to save image. 1 sec. I have to screenshot it. It's being silly. And then we'll get started. I apologize. I had to tell my stories. Custodes. Okay, good. Good enough. Okay. I'm not at the point where I can do this really fast. I'm getting there. Okay, here. I'm gonna put it over here. This is the shirt. Yeah, look at it. That's so cool. And I have to wear it at home now. But that's okay. It'll be a streaming shirt. It'll be like my gross... You know how the stereotype that VTubers are sweaty? That's me. That's actually not me. I'm unless I've worked out. I try to be clean. Why? Nice shirt. Why bring it up? I mean, I feel like it's a given. Even if I didn't say that, like, you guys would see, I don't know, a chick walking around with this shirt and you'd be like, could be Aurelia. And you'd probably be right. So thank you very much. I'm so excited. I'm gonna take a picture of it. And I'm gonna put it on my and I'll post it, but I'm not gonna wear it. I'll just be a picture of it. You know what you should do for getting 40k subs on YouTube? Where does it go? Eat those Mountain Dew popcorn that's on your throne page. Maybe. I actually don't know what we'll do for that just yet. I haven't made any plans yet. And 650 luck, thank you so much for the 5 gifted. You guys are awesome to get. I missed streaming, like not being able to stream for like a whole week. I missed you guys. I missed you. What is this stream? This stream, my name is Aurelia. I'm a Warhammer fan, and we're gonna watch Star Wars versus Warhammer 40k. We should probably get started because I've been yapping. I've been talking. Oh my gosh, it's been 30 minutes. It's been 30 minutes. Oh, okay. Probably do that before the peoples get mad. Before the people get mad. Let me... that. Okay. All right, we are going to we are gonna do it. We're gonna do it. So just we'll get started. One sec. Okay. Now. Oh, dang it. I should have done it when I was on the other screen. Hang on. This is critical. So, a lot of you may be wondering, like Aurelia, why aren't you letting us change your armor today? Like, why? Because we want to change your armor. Because we like to change the colors. This is mad heretical. Yes, it is. It is a touch heretical. But don't worry about it. But you're like, why? Why can't we change your armor? Because I've made an executive decision. She's afraid of bald Reliot? I didn't think about that, but yes, I did turn off bald Relia. But this is critical. This is critical. We're getting cozy today. We're getting cozy today. And this is my little guy that we're gonna snuggle while I stream. And I figured that it was gonna be okay. That you guys would forgive me. Yep, it's the skitter. I knew you guys would love this. I knew you would. I was doing this myself, and then I talked to Jay Flair, who made this version of the skitter. And I told him what I was doing, and he was like, "Here, how about I give you like the full version?" So just drew up the full guy for me. Is there also a rat? Not today. Not today. We're focusing one thing at a time. One thing at a time. I will do a skitter redeem. We'll do a skitter redeem. I think that would be nice. He's just a little guy. Yeah, he's super cute. He's super cute. I'm sorry. We're not gonna do the rat today. No rats today. So, one day we'll demand a TTS mascot to compliment Steve. For the skitter TTS? No, we got Steve is peak. Steve is peak. So, we're snuggling with Skitter today. Do skitters eat rats? I haven't thought about that. They could, if you wanted them to. If you wanted them to, you could. So today we're doing Star Wars versus Warhammer 40k. I'm of the personal opinion that Warhammer would totally demolish Star Wars, but as Fan has said recently in his stories, he said that he is mainly going off of what is a good story to tell. So there's a little bit of give and take in his interpretation on things when it comes to how the worlds work. He goes off a lot of the canon, but let's be fair here. This is for entertainment purposes. It's okay if things aren't perfectly accurate, but from what I've heard, he is very accurate. So, Berserker Rush! Thanks for resubscribing. You've been summoned by the presence of Skitter. Indeed you have. I can see that. I can see that. Okay, so everyone, relax. I'm going to sit back in my chair. We are on, this is a special. We have gone through 12 episodes, and then we've done a lot of mini episodes so far. We might get to, excuse me. We have a couple other specials to get through before episode 13. So we will see how far we get. Fires bombing every planet you come across, while effective, is not in fact entertaining. Correct. They probably could do a lot of that and bring the Republic to a standstill. But it's gonna be way more fun this way, and it's very entertaining. Oh, headphones should go on. I should put on my headphones. Otherwise, I can't hear the story. Audio? Okay. Are we ready? Are we ready? It's been 30 minutes of yapping, thereabouts. Adjust my chair. And I'm already... Okay. We all set? We ready to go? We ready to go? It's time. It's time. And I'm so sad. Fan couldn't make it today, probably because I had to switch up my schedule, so he probably wasn't expecting this. But, we will probably see him next time. So, hi, Fan. Good to see ya. For watching the VOD. Real question, is Skitter ready? Yes, I think Skitter is ready. Look at that face. 100% ready. Hi, sorry, can't join. I'm under the weather. Love the little Skitter. Oh, sorry you can't make it today, Redtail Wolf. Please feel better. Relax. And, we will see you next time. Alright, let's do it. Make sure this doesn't blow out my ears in the first, like, 30 seconds. I thought you said you had to go. Thank you, Redtail Wolf, for the 20 gifted. Thank you very much, that's very kind of you. Bro. Oh my gosh, thank you so much. Please feel better. Please feel better, okay? You rest up, get the extra sleep. Heaven knows I did yesterday. I took what was supposed to be a 30-minute nap, turned into an hour-and-a-half nap, and then I just went to bed. So please, take a page out of my book and just sleep. Let's do it. Let's do it now. Now we're gonna do it. Oh, I hate that. This is the intro, and that was scary. Yeah. That caught me off guard. I was like, huh? What was that? They come from a world. I'm sorry. I saw they come from a world and they started spelling out Cold War, and my first thought was California. Not because it's C-A-L, and I was like, oh no, they're from California. I'm sorry. It's not the brain rot. I was just thinking, like, a lot of people diss on California, and I can't blame them, but like... No, I'm so sorry, Californians. I'm so sorry. I just thought it was funny. California. Cold War. That's where they're from. Cold War.
The Major's column marched forward, grim, determined, and mostly silent, even as the blue bullet-like shells of the enemy's artillery fell among them. He had more than enough men to storm the park where the enemy had set up their artillery firing positions. Which was good, damn good, because his tanks were the first things to vanish. Every Devastator his men had planned to use for cover. Every Lehman Russ tank that was to be their fire support, and the very tip of the spear. Even the Chimeras were going up in flames so fast, men were choosing to hoof it over waiting for their turn to burn. The fire of the enemy was disgustingly accurate, with the only breaks in their attacks coming from those vanishing moments when the civilian buildings obstructed their firing arcs. The Major had tens of thousands of men, and he had been supported by a quarter as many tanks. But at some point in their long march toward the foe, they had become a target priority, one which only swelled, drawing more and more of the enemy's guns in the process. He had wanted to call for air support, either to hasten their approach or otherwise harass the firing positions. But apparently the troop carriers of the Republic doubled as assault ships, and they were not alone besides, aided by dedicated attack craft that could escape most of their deployed atmospheric fighters by veering into space. Suffice to say, the Navy had their own hands full. Even a tactical orbital bombardment was out of the question for the time being, with their larger ships engaged with their own form of trouble. He had wanted to wait for the shock drops and tactical squads of the Tempestus Scions to arrive, to wreak havoc with the foe's lines even as they advanced. But the word had come in, and the Scions had their own problems and objectives. They could not guarantee a drop in his battlefield. He had requested artillery firing support, but their basilisk turrets and other defensive emplacements had been badly mauled. Their vehicle depots raided, their remaining artillery capacity being used to hold the enemy's frontal assault on the Basilica. In dire fear and fury, he had demanded some kind of support, even from the Sisters, something to help his men cover the distance without eating death all the way. But what he received, and was made to be grateful for, was far less than he needed, and nowhere near what he wanted. Sanctus Command had promised them a vague but potent number of reinforcements, but made no commitment on their arrival. Besides, they had been ordered to defer to the command of the Sister Palatine, not him. From the Sisters themselves, he had received something more substantial, though just barely. Annoyed, or perhaps impressed with his persistence, especially after his beating at the hands of their leader, the Sisters of Battle had bestowed him with 2 warriors of the Sisters Repentia, a penitent and her overseer.
Interesting.
While he was glad to receive anything, neither of them would be able to shield his men or provide any kind of value until the battle was properly met. At least the penitent, large as it was capable of dodging and moving around the incoming volleys and had survived up till now. But now he had no tanks, almost no armored support at all. His column was messy, disorganized, running in places, marching in others, always under fire. He himself was marching with them, having abandoned his tank 8 minutes before its destruction.
Oh, that was a good
other
call for you
officers
then.
had followed suit. The ones who had not were dead. He flinched, heat scalding his skin, as several meters away another shell impacted the road, scattering men and body parts in a red cascade which fell like grim rain over the marching soldiers around them. The Major's face and clothes were stained red enough that he could be mistaken for a commissar at a distance.
Oh, yikes.
The thought made him search around,
Interesting.
and sure
Is he
enough,
wearing white?
she was still there. Commissar Indricta. She was marching through the gore rain, roaring some kind of imperial anthem that the men around her were struggling to keep in tune with, their voices drowned out by the whistling and booming of the Republic's artillery. Though she was technically younger than him, she had all the authority to strip him of his unofficial rank and take command at any moment. In fact, while it shamed him to admit so, even to himself, That had been precisely the reason he had sought her out. But when he had found her, lounging outside the barracks, tall hat pulled over her eyes as if snoozing while the artillery fell all around her, she had not taken command. The young commissar had, instead, propped up the hat enough for the glint of her deep violet eyes to complete the smug, cruel expression on her face, and said, "Yes, I'm empowered to take command anywhere I see fit." She had then drawn her bolt pistol and lazily aimed it forward, her arm as thick as that of any—
Oh, don't mess with her. She's psychotic. She's... This art is not helping in the slightest, but she's a little crazy, I think. No, you cannot fix her. You cannot fix her.
male commissar. He had, at that time, stood to her left, the only thing before them having been the wreckage of a struck basilisk turret. Even so, the menace of the action had been even more frightening than the outrage of the Sister Palatine. But only after I execute the commander for incompetence, she said, then squeezing the trigger and firing a loud, cracking bolt into the wreckage. Or heresy, she added, firing again. Or cowardice, she finished, firing one last time. She had turned her expression on him then, an expression of bloodthirst so profound it would have made a hive tyrant envious of her genes. And with the focus of her eyes had come the barrel of her gun, now aimed squarely at his chest. Which one of these are you guilty of, exactly? And they had more or less settled it. He was in charge. The thought left him feeling numb and grim in equal measure as he waded through the rain of his men. And always, with each step he took, he was aware that it could be his last. That the last sensation he would have would be those of exhausted muscles, of being too hot, of being covered in blood and dressed in responsibility he had never asked for and had not been equipped to take. Such was the madness of the galaxy, the reality the Imperium sought to tame, he thought. The notion made him grin, something he regretted a moment later, spitting blood and growling, gritting his now red teeth. In truth, the fire falling among his forces was more showy than anything else, killing only—
Yeah, no, she's terrifying. She's absolutely terrifying. I don't like it when commissars, like, they can pull rank, and I think there's moments where you gotta, but I do not like that, not at all, not, in the slightest. And thank you, Angel Michael, for subscribing. Welcome, I hope you're enjoying stream today. Oh my gosh, this is—
only 5 or 6 men per impact, nothing compared to the numbers he was bringing with him. And most of the enemy artillery was either focusing on the tanks further back on his line, those tanks in the other 2 columns he had created when he had been forced to choose an approach.
You only like this commissar because it's a chick.
Happening much farther away.
Let's make that very clear.
Even so, just one man being pulverized and thrown into the air could cause a shower, and this was more than that. Finally, relief. The shadow of one of the largest civilian buildings on their path passed over him and the front of his marching force, and they halted to recover and regroup their formations. Men wiped gore from their uniforms, shook soot from equipment,
Man or woman, sometimes a bit of crazy is attractive. No, I don't see that. No. No. I am not a Conrad Kurz girly. I'm not a, it's time for my psychotic man. No. 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 No, no. No. Oh my gosh. No. You can't fix them, chat. You can't fix them. You can't. I don't think you can make her worse. I think the worst thing that's going to happen is that your brain is going to be all over the place. I think that's the only way it gets worse for you. And just a humble blood angel reporting for duty. Well, welcome, Battle Brother. No. No. Sanguinius and his crazy episodes. That doesn't mean he was psychotic. Like, crazy no, those aren't the same. Those are not the same. Not the same at all.
Screamed into their hands and became sick, tossing up where they stood. Major Lazarus did not drop or rest, fearing that he would not be able to recover if he dropped any of his own fronts. While it was acceptable for his men to show their weakness, at least now, while they could, it was not acceptable for him, now more than ever.
Yeah.
Instead, he waved his Vox crew forward and took one of their headsets for himself. Column Beta, Column Gamma, do you copy? Over. He said into it. This is Column Beta to Column Alpha.
Oh,
we are about to make the
in...
final approach over our bridge. Over, came the first response. This is Column Gamma to Column Alpha. We copy. We are also ready to make our charge on your command. The voice was cut off suddenly. Column Gamma? Column Gamma, repeat last transmission. Over.
He dead.
He said. No response. Column Beta, do you have visual on Column Gamma? Over. Again, nothing. But he could hear the Vox working. What had happened? Was he somehow being jammed? Had they been attacked? The more he thought about it, the more it made sense. The park could only be openly approached by 3 bridges. But luckily, just before each approach was a large commercial building, something the artillery was unable or unwilling to fire into, providing a place to gather in relative safety before the approach itself. If he were in command of the defense, this would be a prime spot for an ambush. But then why had the others been attacked and his group not? The others had arrived first, but if his location was also primed for a trap, why hadn't it been sprung? He looked around, and the reason hit him hard. His column was still gathering, regrouping. The enemy was going to hit hard with something massive. But what? Where? He looked around, eyes scanning the buildings, the road, the spires. The spires! There, adhered to the side of the spires, caterpillar-like tanks stood silent, unnoticed in their altitude and angles, only visible from here, and only when looking back the way they had come. His mind frenzied. What should he do? What could he do without creating a panic? Heavy weapons teams, set down! Arm! He called.
Yeah, get him.
Men turned to heed him, and sergeants and other officers repeated his orders, but no one had caught on yet. Not any but the most canny, who began looking around. Take cover! Into the megastructure! Prepare for an assault by the enemy! He called.
Good idea,
Heavy weapons teams, aim there! He yelled, as the men who had just sat down paused in confusion, wondering if they should run for cover or stay on their weapons. They followed his aiming hand in a vague direction and quickly spotted their targets. They began to fire, las cannons, missile launchers, and more, beginning a stuttering first volley as the guardsmen began to dash for the huge structure which had been shielding them from the artillery. And then everything became hell.
Yep.
The tanks adhering to the side of the tall spires opened fire, and the doors and windows of the huge building the guard were fleeing towards flew open, revealing massed groups of clone soldiers who had been ready and waiting all along. Blast them! One of them roared, and the clones let loose a rain of scything blue death from their positions. The Major suddenly found himself caught in the crossfire that was surely consuming his other 2 columns even then.
Oh no.
His men were faltering, they were floundering, they were dying! He grabbed the Voxcaster's howler mic and activated it, raising it to his lips and nearly deafening himself with the sound. Men, to me, to me! He roared. His guardsmen did as instructed.
Yeah, good job.
Affix bayonets!
Yeah!
Those who had not already did so now, locking
Gotta
the
fix
various
those bayonets!
blades to the muzzles of their las guns and auto rifles. As one! The Imperator! Charge! The Major screamed, pulling free his chainsword from the scabbard at his side and dropping the mic, charging first, but quickly followed by over 10,000 roaring human warriors. Together, they drove into the rain of blue bolts with desperation and fury born of the will to survive. Not as a race, not as an empire, but as men, individually and together, for just the next few moments. He was in the lead for a while, but then a shot took him in the left thigh, the center of his chest, and the side of his head. His carapace armor absorbed most of the first two shots, jerking and jostling him with high-speed, high-energy impacts. But he felt a fifth of his face slough off, and horrendous pain blossomed there. His speed faltered, and while he was not trampled, he was overtaken by the men around him, who, in turn, took the next volley of blaster fire, some of which had been destined for him, he was certain. But Major Lazarus did not cease his charge, did not surrender to the pain.
Hang on. Major Lazarus. Man is either gonna die and get some servitor action, or he's gonna get very, very grievously wounded, almost die, and then he's gonna be like, get some amazing surgery and be okay. That is a very, very specific name. So I have to say it now. That name, there's a lot of connotation with that name, so you know.
Eating his vision and filling his mind. Instead, he channeled it into a scream of defiance and kept his legs pumping. Even as a shot fired from a window far above cracked the carapace armor on his right shoulder.
I'm impressed.
He drove on and on until suddenly he was there. His men had formed a ring of their dead around the window that was his target. The clones stationed there, armed with rotating blaster cannons that spat blue death in wide volleys that only grew inescapably tight as he neared. The Major used his free hand to yank his first grenade off his belt, bringing it to the thumb of his sword hand to pull the pin before lobbing it and leaping forward behind the mound of the dead. The clones still fired, and their strafing shots caught his left leg and shin, blowing the carapace armor there away and burning him, but leaving him intact. The same could not be said for his enemies, as the frag sailed into the wide window they were using to fire from. The clones scrambled to escape it, but not only were they weighed down by their large guns, but Major Lazarus had not stopped his assault, snagging and tossing more grenades from the corpses, clearing the window seconds later of anything that could still fight back. His men found him and pulled him to his feet, others charging ahead and into the window, the same thing happening all around them as the clones either withdrew or were overrun by one method or another. Cursing, spitting, and gratefully taking a shot of something which killed his pain, the Major followed his men into the building, still much more a sergeant than a commander. The place was some kind of market, a center of commerce with stalls and storefronts lining the walls of huge, open chambers of various shapes and designs. Walkways always leading between them, matching the theme of the room. He moved through several, and soon found himself fighting inside a luminous white oval room, large enough to fit 2 Imperial Knights, one on top of the other, its volume honeycombed with intersecting paths and bridges. The walkways in question were of an odd design, in his mind made to look like railless, guardless paths of light. In reality, the paths did have guards, solid barriers that rose about waist-high on either side, invisible unless touched by something, revealing smooth white ceramic. He and his men, as well as their foes, used these for cover and found them oddly sturdy, though they became permanently visible in a wide radius wherever they were struck by either blasters, bullets, or last shots. The near-invisible nature of the paths, and the layers and layers of bridges above and below where he was fighting, led to a chaotic battlefield where Lazarus could only guess whether the shots he would take would actually fly to their target, or if they would suddenly be intercepted by yet another, previously unseen barrier. The room had been designed to look like a heavenly art gallery, but doing battle in it was like fighting in an emperor-damned funhouse. Suddenly, the 2 men at his side screamed as bolts from behind them struck them down. Lazarus leapt forward and tossed his smoke grenade,
This is the luckiest man I've ever heard of.
And crawling as they blind fired after him, making for a bend in the path, and thereby putting the waist-high barrier between himself and them. As the smoke cleared, he could see he had been outflanked. The damned toy soldiers had dropped down from a higher platform and had hit him and the men behind him with an ambush. They spotted him and fired, and he sneered as their shots hit the invisible barrier, and he vanished behind a suddenly revealed wall of pale but blackening ceramic. He popped up and started getting his own shots off, but he was just as hindered as they, and he felt like he had been chewed up by an ogre, his body
yeah.
a mess of aches and imprecision.
And his
They
face.
were moving up as they shot at him, trying to catch him dead to rights and out in the open. He grit his teeth, slinging the last rifle he had been using and drawing his last pistol and his last grenade, a crack grenade.
Ooh.
He pulled the pin on the thing and pitched it directly at the advancing troopers. The wounded major then watched the sphere adhere itself to the ceramic with some unseen technology, the gyroscopic shaped charge within spinning to face the surface before detonating. He would have preferred to use a frag for this, as crack grenades were made for armor penetration and did not have a great spread. Still, it did its job, blowing open a segment of the walkway barrier, killing one of the clones and exposing the others.
Nice, good job, buddy.
He popped up again, firing with his pistol, the toy soldier so close as to keep its limited power effective. He had downed one with the grenade, and now two with his pistol, before the three that remained were on him, charging the rest of the
so
distance. Ah, feck! The major groaned, shooting and stumbling as he took even more shots, his chest plate cracking and
I'm
hissing,
so
his
impressed.
left arm cooking, and his right leg
Ew.
losing its strength as a small hail of bolts chased him to the ground. He dropped his pistol and reached for the sword at his hip, tugging at it, but suddenly finding himself looking up at the three clones above him, one of them raising the butt of his rifle to begin bashing. The major raised his arm to brace, but without warning, something dropped behind the clones, a shape in black, hitting the ground with a heavy thud. The clones spun, rifles out, and Lazarus craned his neck to see what had happened.
Sister
It was
Repentia?
a body, an Imperial soldier in black, having fallen from above. Thump, crack, and then another one fell, not too far from them, the soldier groaning, leg clearly broken. The clones turned back to the major, intent on finishing him before more corpses fell on them, but the offending clone never got as far as striking. His bucket-like helmet, complete with the head inside, came flying right off his shoulders.
Oop.
The other clones reacted quickly, but not quickly enough. The long barrels of their cumbersome DC-15A blaster rifles making them too unwieldy to use in such close quarters. It was the first corpse, no corpse at all, the soldier having risen silently and attacked viciously. Lazarus's eyes...
Oh, there you go, Kriegers. There you go, Kriegers. Get him with the shovels. Get him with the shovels. The shovel.
His bulged as he watched the guardsman, dressed in a black overcoat, his face hidden in a large, encompassing gas filtration mask, lunge. He lashed out at the second clone, swiping with his weapon, an axe of all things, and cutting one of the trooper's arms off at the elbow, following that up with a hard chop to the clone's skull, ending him. That was when Lazarus actually saw what weapon the soldier was using.
'Twas a shovel.
No axe at all, but a shovel?
The
The
memes.
guardsman yanked his shovel out of the dead clone's skull and helmet, but would have been gunned down by the third
Impressive.
clone had he not been gunned down first by the other guardsman, who was sitting up, ignoring his obviously broken leg as he riddled the white-clad clone warrior with bullets from his autogun at close range.
Another breed right there.
Two more soldiers dropped with hard thumps, though the enemy was gone, and the rest came down on more sensible rappels as Lazarus was helped to his feet. He looked up and whistled at the height the others were coming from, looking at the soldier who had helped him up, and wondering how he himself was still standing after a fall like that.
Yeah,
The major was barely shocked to find Commissar Indricta leading these insane, faceless men.
Of course it was her. Of course it was her leading these guys. Ironic how the guardsmen call the clones toys. It is... Okay, I did find that funny. I find that very funny. We are entrenching this position. There you go. Are you happy? Are you happy? See, I said I liked her for normal reasons. Okay, okay, you say that now. I'm still judging you, okay?
Coming down on her own rappel, her blood-streaked grin more alive than ever before. This was hell, and she was thoroughly enjoying it.
Oh my
Major
gosh.
Lazarus, I'm glad I found you, she said, disconnecting from her rope and walking over to him. I am elated to report the enemy is in full retreat. The fighting now is mostly in those pockets that we managed to corner and cut off. The structure is ours. Yes, ours, to be our grave. Forgive me for saying so, but this is no victory, Commissar. Our back is broken, our armor is gone, exposed and destroyed, and what is left of us is packed into this building. As soon as the enemy finish their withdrawal, I doubt they will leave it standing. They got what they wanted from this ambush. Our approach is blunted, he said, but not halted, Indricta added. He thought for a moment and then nodded. How many of these men do you have? He asked. She grinned more widely.
Oh gosh.
Thousands, she said. And are they all as fearless as this one? He asked, clapping the soldier who had saved him on the shoulder.
He's like, where can we get more Kriegers? The Krieger has a shovel. The enemy is doomed. Yes, Jonah. Thank you for the super chat. And thank you, ALJ, for the super chat too. Absolutely doomed. Very doomed.
The man stood resolute as a statue and just as silent. She nodded. From where do they hail? He asked, still looking at the man, noticing how much shorter he was than he himself. He couldn't help but wonder how old the guardsman was under that mask. They come from a world called Krieg, she said. The word was like a clap of lightning, leaving Lazarus stunned. But slowly, he returned her grin and squeezed the guardsman's shoulder more tightly.
He's like, yeah.
Then perhaps our assault is not as blunted as I thought. Gather close. I have a plan.
Wonderful. Bum, 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 bum. Fantastic. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. I love it. I love it. I'm gonna drink the rest of my Mountain Dew really fast. Okay. Let's do, so we just watched this one. We have 2 more shorts until we get to to episode 13. I don't know if we'll get there today. I don't know if we'll get there. A good time for war crimes. This is the perfect time, I guess. Let's see. This one's called Soldiers of the Store. Oh, which is that's what they said the next one was. I've been missing so much of this. I'm lost. I really need to catch up. Yes, catch up. This is such a good series. Please follow and like and subscribe. Do all of the things for a fan with too much time. It's really, really, really good stuff. So. Yeah, Auri. Very soothing before we get into something like super intense. This is intense. There's so many words. I'm like, what is this called? Words. Oh, cool. These people are awesome. So glad I caught the stream. 1313 best boy. Yes. I love Freakers are great. Thank you, Cubage. Ooh. Okay, I give you
65
chills.
watched on from his position atop the turret gun of his command ATTE Walker, the height of the mass driver affording him a relatively advantageous view from his hill in the park. The trees, once vibrant, tall, and green, had been entirely cleared away, allowing for their artillery to be utterly unobstructed. What the clone saw through the enhanced sight of his electro-binoculars left him feeling conflicted. The Clone Wars had dragged on for almost 4 years, if not longer. In that time, many Jedi had died, and many, many more clones besides. The Jedi generals who had performed the best had, by and large, encouraged the clones.
For some reason, I thought the Clone Wars was longer than 4 years, but I think it's just because I'm used to Warhammer and the war never stops. So I'm like, I thought the Clone Wars was going on for like 10 years. No, I guess it was only 4. Huh. Huh. Okay then.
Under their command to embrace their individuality, their creativity, and their cunning. It was in this way that they had bested billions of droids and countless planetary militias, as well as separatists of all stripes. But even so, there had always been a line, a certain place they were not willing to go with organic fighters that they went to all the time when it came to fighting droids. It was a lack of honor, a denial of personhood, a malice and contempt that even the Jedi rarely tempered when they faced droids. But that was not happening here. Here, they were treating these invaders, these Pies Dia Imperials, just as they would treat a horde of B1s. Perhaps even worse. The lieutenant watched as flashes lit up the far sides of the buildings, which the invaders were sheltering behind, knowing these to be the first 2 of the 3 planned.
Yeah, I guess it makes sense. If you've been in a war where you've really only been fighting droids, and you're like, well, droids in this universe, they're like, they don't really have a soul, so I don't feel bad about killing them. And suddenly, you're fighting humans? You're fighting humans? And yeah, I would feel way worse about that. Oh, we'll see if the clones are mentally tough.
Ambushes. His AT-TE walkers were combining their firepower with advantageous positioning and the element of surprise to hammer the enemy in what they thought would be safe harbor. The 6-legged walkers timed their attacks with the sudden assaults of the squads 65 had sent to each of the ambush locations, hiding within the very buildings the imps would think to use for cover. Without the use of their best and heaviest armor, elements of the invading army his sniper tanks had seen neutralized first, the Imperial cultists stood no chance against the vicious crossfire they would be caught in. But that was not all. Along with the assault squads to aid in their decimation, he had also sent his best marksmen out to neutralize their evident commanders. Headless, armless, and naked, the imps would be left without any options save for frantic advance or frantic retreat. The ambushes were scything through them, the losses for the imps reportedly growing massive in both of the initial attacks. The results of Master Ayla's plan were devastating. And that was good, because they needed to be. To say that 65 and his men were outnumbered by the attacking imps would not do justice to what the clones were facing. Even after enduring prolonged bombardment, the arriving enemy had 12 rifles for every blaster 65 had under his command.
Dude, that's insane.
And drastic measures needed to be taken to even the odds if they were going to hold their position and continue aiding General Sakura in the main battle. "Commander," said a voice through the comm. It was Vector, one of the marksmen turned assassins whom he had sent out to the first column. He and the other two had been instructed to choose high-altitude locations among their buildings, flag the enemy commanders, and then take out the one they thought was highest ranking.
Yeah.
Hard lessons from the Blue Massacre had revealed that Imperial forces were heavily reliant on their command chains and commanders in general. Naturally, removing them became as much a priority as targeting the tactical droids. "I got him. Enemy commander in the first column is dead,"
Oof.
he said. A moment later, another voice mirrored the words, slighter this time. "One of the tanks blew him away before I could get him, but yeah, enemy commander in the second column is neutralized," said the clone marksman. "Good, both of you get back here on the double. Let the assault squads withdraw at their own pace," he told the snipers. "Sir, yes, sir," they said in unison. 65 waited a few seconds more before looking down at the small console on his wrist and contacting his third assassin who hadn't reported a kill yet. "Catch, have you neutralized your target?" 65 radioed. There was a pause, a silence.
Haha, there's two of them, I bet.
"Not yet. Still looking for him," said Catch. "What's the matter, Catch? Their commanders are typically not difficult to spot." "I know," the marksman said, "but I'm not seeing the typical signs. Don't worry, I'll find him. The attack on this comm hasn't even started yet." "Oh wait, something's happening," said the clone sniper. "Just focus on finding the commander and taking him out. You copy?" 65 said. "Yes, sir," said Catch. 65 cut the link and then
Someone did
refocused
not
his
do
attention
his
on
job.
the ongoing attacks, knowing that the third and final one would begin at any moment. It bothered him, but did not surprise him that the attacks had not been perfectly synchronized. The third column had traveled farther than the other two, and arrived later. To ensure maximum damage, the clones needed to give the Imperials time to cluster in the protective shadow of the building. The more tightly packed, the better. With their cover turned into a kill zone and unable to organize a defense, the imps would be left with only two choices. He had hoped they would choose to retreat and scatter, but 65 could already see that both the second and first column were electing to charge desperately forward. Column 2 still had armored support, though it was rare, smoking and barely managing to plod along when it appeared on the opposite side of the bridge. Men clung to the armor and swarmed around it like green-clad rats. The turret of the tank, a Lehman Russ battle tank, according to the intelligence they had on the imps, was odd compared to the one 65 had seen before, squat and glowing a bright, radiating blue.
Oh, you should
the
run.
cannon flashed.
You should run.
A shining burst moving up from the base to the end of the barrel before discharging a tight, radiant lance of blue, hyper-accelerated plasma. The beams struck the center left of the fortifications across the bridge, instantly burning through them and through the ground and building, leaving a dripping circular hole through the entire structure. The gap was only 4 feet around, but anything even close to it was
Only 4
immolated.
feet around,
and
only.
where before there had been a pristine line of barricades ready to be defended, now there was a hole, and then, after a second discharge, another hole soon after. 65 scowled. "Divert 25% of our current artillery capacity to the defense of the bridges," he told the officer who stood just below him, to his left. The commander gestured
No
with his
wonder they took out the
electro-binoculars.
tanks first. Terrifying.
"Focus fire on the tanks and vehicles." "Yes, sir," said the officer, turning to relay the specific orders into his helmet comms. Several of the three-legged sniper tanks turned away from the high-firing arcs they were using to aid Master Aayla Secura's assault, and brought both their mass driver cannons and their dorsal medium laser cannons to bear on the much closer and completely exposed targets charging across the bridge. The effects were decisive. The assaulting tank and many like it were suddenly rent into pieces by a volley of laser-grade blaster fire and ionized solid shells of Durasteel. The tank with the plasma weapon in particular sparked and seemed to suck in the air around it as it rattled and fell to pieces before detonating in a sudden, deafeningly loud explosion. The imps near the tank became sprays of senseless flesh bound within armor, bursting like children's water balloons against the onrushing palm of the concrete-like compression wave. The murderous air was, itself, running ahead of something far more lethal, an expanding corona of heat and energy which atomized all it touched, blackening blood, and shearing away the armor of uniforms before the remains contained within them could even touch the ground. When the rising, electrically charged mushroom cloud had been cleared away, it revealed a new chasm almost twice as wide as the tank itself had been, leaving a large gap near the center of the bridge surrounded by molten and superheated metal. 65 braced himself as the shock waves from the distant blast rolled over him, his helmet shaking slightly. When he raised his head to view the scene once more, he was shocked. Not by the power of the explosion or the damage it had caused.
Was he actually shocked?
It was the Imperials that shocked him, not the tank at all. The imps of the second column, despite an enormous amount of their forces having been devoured by the blast, were still trying to follow through on the assault, hugging the sides of the bridge, burning boots and feet on cooling, glowing metal.
They're more worried about their commissar than they are about what the enemy's gonna do to them.
Made their way around the superheated area which surrounded the hole. The clone sighed heavily, realizing with no small amount of annoyance that the cultists would not be turned back. Fine, then he and his men would force them back. He turned to his right,
good luck,
looking
man.
down
That's
at
not
the
gonna
officer
happen.
standing nearby, ready to take his commands. Have the defense task force split into 2 groups, and line up along our barricades on the first and second approach. Pick out enemy commanders where possible, and once they have reached a quarter of the way across, open fire and keep it coming. Have the flame company move into cover behind the defenders and wait for further orders. The officer nodded, wordlessly looking away before raising his hand to his helmet as he began relaying the orders. 65 turned back and watched the mass of varied clone troopers who stood before the tanks begin to march into position. White and yellow armor gleaming in the fading sun, the distant clouds having not dimmed it enough to hide the splendor of the Gar's finest. The troopers moved a short distance to the barricades, strong fortifications made of ferrocrete reinforced with Durasteel, some of the central patches even being ray shielded as well. The clones filled the spaces within and behind, weapons bristling from around and over the walls and shelters of the barricades as orders were barked, sergeants and officers clarifying priorities to eager troopers. 65 refocused on the imps, judging that the first column would reach the quarter mark before the second. Focusing his sight there, he could see the screaming, rabid ranks of the Imperial forces as they charged across the cleared bridge. They moved in disorganized mobs, shooting as they ran, some more accurately than others, all either unaware or unmindful of the kill zone they were running into. A few of the Imperial soldiers carried flags, others bore swords or wore enormous sparking gauntlets.
I love
and
the swords,
65
honestly.
saw more than a few chainsaws raised into the air, belching black smoke as their many teeth whirred and spun.
Yeah, get him,
He was
get him,
looking
get
at
him,
a
get
horde
him,
of
get him.
madmen, and felt very little remorse in that moment as he watched his troopers open fire.
Good luck,
The
bro.
result was a near literal wall of blue bolts, and when it met the ragged first and second ranks of the charging imps, they reacted appropriately. Men were thrown off their feet, flesh burning and
But they
melting as
kept
flak
coming.
armor was burst open, scattering shards of shrapnel. Warriors in carapace armor staggered through the first, second, and third volleys, but began falling in mass as they were boiled alive inside their shells of ceramite.
They're gonna throw more men at you.
Additionally, with
Good luck.
100 shots per blaster pack, it would be a good while before any of 65's men would need to cease fire to reload.
Good luck,
The Imperials
buddy.
tried to fire back, running and gunning, but the majority of their shots were horrendously inaccurate, regardless of the weapon they were attempting to use, and the fortifications stood against nearly all of the returning fire that managed to connect. It was not long before the imps of the first column began to break,
falling to fear as comrades and commanders alike fell all around them. Some
Oh no. We're gonna see that commissar, they're gonna be like, yes, they're fleeing 100%, that's amazing. And then they're gonna see the commissar with her hat start shooting them. And then they're gonna charge anyway because they would rather die to the enemy than to the commissar. And they are going to be horrified. Horrified. Because they're like, oh my gosh, they're insane. They are insane.
began to rout, and that trickle of terror was swelling into a cascade. Feeling satisfied with the work being done there, the commander moved his sight to the troops of the second column, who were just about to cross the quarter mark. Where the imps of the first column had been made up of bands of 6 or more soldiers, all in various uniforms and heraldries, these newcomers from the second column were the opposite. Running far apart from each other, heads down as they charged, these men wore uniforms colored green and tan and seemed to understand that by staying further apart, they made themselves less susceptible to the focused fire which had been devouring the squads on the other bridge. Occasionally, scattered troops in distant groups of 10 would stop, kneel, and open fire, covering the charge of the men rushing past them until they themselves were shot, or until so many others had passed their kneeling positions that their visibility had become less than acceptable. 65 found himself feeling relieved that he had taken the precaution of ordering the other clones to clear the bridges of anything that could be used as cover, as these soldiers would certainly have turned any such havens into hard points to contest. But there was no cover, and these bridges averaged a stretch which spanned a little more than half a kilometer. The losses these men took as they crossed into the kill zone of the bridge were still hideous to behold. To their credit, they did not rout, even though groups and individuals did stumble or hesitate in the face of the certain death which they now ran towards, and which often found them moments later. And their aim was precise enough that those who stopped to shoot quickly made themselves valued targets. These Imperials scuffed the forces defending the barricades, wounding some and killing 1 or 2, but ultimately failing to shake the defenders in any way or make any significant headway. And yet still they came on. Soon, mounds of the dead began to pile up, tripping up advancing cultists with their own screaming wounded and silent fallen. Some even began to use the thicker patches of corpses as cover, laying behind them and firing.
That's so rough.
By the many moons, the imps from the second column were creating artificial barricades from the bodies, a display which was nearly as sickening as it was proving effective. The mounds of corpses successfully holding against the blue rain of death.
So,
then,
you could say this whole thing is kind of like trench warfare, huh? No man's land?
Commander, I'm sorry, came a voice over his comm set.
Are they?
65's heads-up display showed him from where the message was coming from. The fact that it had come unbidden already told him it was a priority 1 message. A glance at the name had him refocusing his electrobinoculars to the as-yet empty third bridge. He saw nothing. No signs of continuing fire, nor any Imperials charging down the avenue. He would have thought that meant they had retreated, but from the sound of Gaff's voice, he highly doubted it. "What's happening, Gaff? What's your status?" he asked. There was a brief pause, and 65 almost repeated himself before Gaff began speaking again. "They charged the building, sir. Overran us at the lip. We made them pay badly for it, sir. Real bad. But we were forced to give way. They forced their way into the Stratos Central Mall and began isolating us." 65 felt ice spike his veins.
They got you.
"Are you cut off? Why didn't you withdraw as planned?" he yelled into his comm. "I'm sorry, sir. I thought we could double around, hit them with a surprise countercharge, maybe buy Catch enough time to kill their commander. But we failed. But we are not cut off. We are withdrawing down the sub-access tunnels, same way we came. We should be with you in a little while. We have a lot of wounded, Commander." 65 sighed heavily, but nodded his head in a gesture of acceptance. "Copy that, Gaff. Just Finish getting your men out of there. As soon as you're clear, we're going to level that entire structure with the sniper tanks, so don't take too long. Tell Ketch to go ahead of the others. I want him here in case. Ketch is dead, sir, Gaff said, cutting his commander off. The clone felt the world become a little less real. Ketch had been his pod brother. They had survived geonosis.
I'm so
Are you
sorry.
sure, Captain? Ketch has lived through a lot worse than these imps can put out. 65 insisted, teeth clenched. I'm sorry, Commander. Him and his whole squad, the clone began. Are you sure, Captain Gaff? Are you 100%
I feel
sure?
bad.
The commander
I feel
demanded.
so bad. Yikes.
65, he was decapitated. Gaff blurted. A silence hung between them then, the only sounds being those of movement on Gaff's end and those of battle on 65's. Understood. Get back here, Gaff, and let me know the instant that you and your men are clear of Strato Central Mall. Do you understand? Commander, look! Space Marines! The officer to his left shouted, pointing with his hand.
Oh no.
The commander felt his heart stutter, felt the earlier chill return with nearly twice the force, running through him like a mist step in the dark. He cut the channel and raised his electrobinoculars, aiming them in the direction indicated towards the first column. There they were, over 20 of them, with more appearing by the moment.
Wait, but that's an Ogren. That's an Ogren. That's not a Space Marine. Guess we'll find out.
Just broken the front ranks and were striding forward, hefting massive metal shields before them that were absorbing the firepower being put out by the troopers without difficulty. 65 blinked. He had seen hollows of the Space Marine which General Skywalker had fought, and that thing had not been as large as these, and it had been encased fully
so it is
in
an
armor,
Ogren.
to the point of seeming like a machine, unlike these clearly organic, gigantic men. Those details barely
Ogrens are
mattered,
sick, though.
however,
You're
as an
also
artillery
close.
shell sailed into the rightmost shield-bearing warrior. The metal dented, and the giant Imperial staggered, but held firm as the shot rebounded away, striking the bridge to his left. This scene repeated itself as more and more artillery fire was directed at them, the shells bouncing or rebounding off the impossibly thick shields. How, by the many moons, could men be strong enough to do anything like that?
They're
Without
Ogrens,
speaking,
baby!
65 reached down to his belt and withdrew a detonator. It was little more than a thin metal tube with a bright red button on one side and an antenna on the other. But linked to this small thing were the 4 baradium charges his men had secured to the bottom of the first bridge. Just a single flake of the stuff could power a thermal detonator. The baradium charges they were planning on using had much, much more than that. He had placed them in accordance with General Sakura's orders, but he had hoped he would not be forced to use them. One of the huge warriors fell, and then another, but they were not dying fast enough, their shields not failing quickly enough. The soldiers around them were rallying, the tide of the rout turning even as the clones frenzied to take out those they could before the imps could get too close. The lesser cultists hid behind the shields of the larger ones, and soon they were past the halfway point and drawing closer and closer. PLX missile launchers were deployed, killing another 2 more of the giants, but many more were left. And the imp soldiers who had made it with them had come too far to surrender now. They crossed the 3/4 mark, charging and screaming all the while. 65 felt his stomach twisting, but reasserted his discipline. Order the men on the first bridge to pull back, away from the barricades. They have 15 seconds to seek further cover.
Ooh, 15
He told
seconds.
the officer to his right, his voice clipped and rushed, even more so than normal. The clone nodded and did not even turn to the side as he began to hurriedly relay the orders into his helmet comm. The fire coming from the barricades on the first 2 bridges ended abruptly, and the clones stationed there began to vault and leap back from the barricades, pulling comrades and equipment with them before ducking to the ground and covering their heads. 65 waited for the last possible moment when he saw all the clones escape the blast radius before he pressed his thumb down against the firm button of the detonator. It almost seemed to resist the pressure of his digit before sinking into the handle. The charges detonated in a row, starting with the one farthest from the barricades and rolling forward with 3 more successive blasts.
Woo!
Each individual charge dwarfed the explosion released by the dying tank on the other bridge, erupting with the power of a weapon meant to tear frigates and destroyers apart.
Flesh was peeled from bone in
Ew.
nanoseconds, and the massive warriors, their shields, and the men around them were
Rip.
blown into ashes,
Rip
with
the
those
Ogrins.
furthest from the blast centers being scooped up by the bone-grinding shockwaves, raining down as gory giblets over the clones instead of vanishing without a trace. The fortifications cracked, and most of the ray shields there failed, though the final charge was by no means placed very near to the end of the barricades. The whole bridge pitched and rattled, shedding metal and struts like a Jabimi mud dragon shedding flakes of dead skin. By the time the 4 fiery blasts had fully concluded, they had not left one large hole burnt through the structure, but rather had left the entire structure of the bridge completely skeletal, with gaps and pitfalls now riddling its creaking, swaying surface. It
Yeah,
was
they
a
really guessed
testament to Axumite architecture that the whole thing did not simply collapse into the chasm it spanned, where it would fall for hours before coming to rest hundreds of kilometers down. The display of absolute destruction, coupled with the very nearly untraversable state of the bridge, finished the work the ambushes and blaster volleys should have completed long before now. The enemy fully broke. The first bridge began an unabashed and disorganized retreat, running back the way they had come, taking even more fire as the ATTE tanks which remained in their ambush points began blasting once more, taking holes out of their routing army even as they attempted to sprint all the way back to their besieged base. 65 smiled behind his helmet, feeling a surge of confidence bolster him unexpectedly. After their recent losses, he had feared these Imperials were invincible. Their weapons too powerful to overcome, their
Where's the
warriors
commissar?
gods marching in legion lockstep. But while their technologies were formidable, and the mettle of their warriors far exceeded that of most cultures in the galaxy, they were no immortals. With proper tactics, cunning, and intersecting lines of fire, anything, even these monsters, could be put down. Commander 65! Commander! We're taking fire! The enemy has taken up positions at the upper levels of the mall! They're blasting us! They're starting... The sudden, urgent message came from his priority comm, and a glance told him it was from the ATTE tanks that had been positioned for the third ambush. So it seemed those imps were going to make more noise than they already had. He grit his teeth and responded. This is Commander 65. Pull back. You are to pull back now. Draw yourself away and to the north until we have cleared your ambush point. There was no response. 65 repeated himself.
Oh no,
and
he
again,
did.
Nothing
He
came
gone.
back.
He
He
gone.
almost spat into his helmet, looking towards the third bridge once more and seeing the flashing and hearing the telltale booms through the audio enhancers in his binoculars. But seeing nothing directly. Not yet. He glanced back towards
They're
the
gonna
second
get
bridge,
you.
which was still an active battle. There he saw with no small amount of frustration that the more organized soldiers in green and tan had truly managed to dig in using nothing more than the armored corpses of their own fallen. Now they were engaged in a standing firefight with the clones at the barricades, no longer moving forward but exchanging attacks. From the looks of it, they had lost so many men to create their own barricades, and those barricades in question were so disadvantageously positioned compared to those of the clones that the conclusion was foregone.
This music is fire.
Even if they fought to the last, they would lose. Move the defense forces that have been positioned at the first bridge to the third, and tell them to prepare for an enemy assault. Give them the same firing orders. 65 said. He watched as those clones, which had retreated from the cover of the first bridge, now formed up and marched to the barricades that had been set up at the third. And these barricades were the most extensive of all, thicker, with multiple layers to allow comfortable overlapping lines of fire. Repeating blaster cannons were mounted every 5 meters along the frontmost layers, and mortars had been set up in the rear. These precautions he had taken due to the fact that the third bridge was the only bridge which bore no baradium mines. The enemy had no way of knowing this, of course, but he had layered more conventional defenses there to make up for the lack of charges.
It had been
Interesting.
tempting to consider mining all of the bridges, but while he and his men could move between all the buildings and platforms of the city using the smaller, interconnecting walkways and access
yeah, you don't want to
passages,
cripple yourself.
these larger roads were the only methods for his walkers to travel about, and cutting them all off would prevent him
yeah.
from reinforcing the general, should she need it. Satisfied with the enforcement of his orders,
Yeah,
the
okay.
commander allowed his eyes to
sense.
wander back to the far side of
But now you have a bridge that they can take. Now they can take a bridge.
the third bridge, where they widened. Standing in ranks at the other end of the span, he saw them. They were almost fully assembled already, moving with the same trained, no, bred precision that 65 himself had seen all his life in his own brothers. But there was something else there, something he could not define, but that shook a part of him, deep within. These new imps were standing shoulder to shoulder. They wore black uniforms and coats, and their faces were completely hidden behind archaic rebreathers. They hefted thick rifles of the kind the Dia cult seemed to favor, and raised banners and standards high, though their meanings were lost on the clone. Soon they were in position,
They're gonna get
thousands
you.
and thousands of them, standing at attention in thick blocks.
Then came the order to march. They were so silent that 65 could actually hear them through the electro-binoculars, the translation matrix in his helmet translating the language for him as it was spoken,
Oh, dang.
superimposing the meaning naturally.
First rank, ready!
The men of the first rank stomped, bringing their rifles down to point forward in unison. The officer, dressed little differently from his men, but holding a sparking, shimmering cavalry saber aloft in his hand, lowered it to point towards the enemy in sync with the bayoneted barrels of his men's guns.
Charge!
The first rank broke off from the
I got
rest, first
chills.
marching, then jogging, and finally running, all as one. 65 watched on in sick fascination, counting the seconds as they approached, and then passed the line into the kill zone. His men opened fire, once more becoming a storm of death, even more so than before.
Oh, they
The
don't care.
repeaters strafed
They
the front
love
line,
that stuff.
dropping Imperials in swaths of burning armor and flesh. Yet those behind them did not pause, balk, hesitate, or even slow down as they trampled their own fallen. The dead, the wounded, it mattered not. The officer was blasted into chunks by the focused fire of over 100 DC-15A blaster rifles. But not one of the masked troopers turned to
He
look,
was so
save
happy for
the
that,
one
too.
who went to retrieve
Get
his
'em,
sword,
boys.
lifting it into the air and wordlessly taking his position. That was another thing that 65 began to notice.
Sick!
The utter silence of them. Occasionally, one of the struck or dying would cry out, but even then, the majority of them simply fell silently, dying even less dramatic deaths
That is
than
eerie as
boys.
heck.
They were so silent he could hear the next whistle, despite the distance.
Second rank, ready!
The clone commander's
Ooh,
eyes
they're
departed
gonna-
the scene of death at the front to draw his vision back to the rear of the bridge. There, he saw the scene repeating itself, the troopers preparing to begin their death march.
Charge!
Came the call, and they did. Meanwhile, the first rank was making surprisingly good headway. Where men would begin to tire, these masked soldiers only sped up, and where men would slow, if only to carefully step around the dead and dying, these men paid no heed. Indeed, seemed well trained in the grotesque art of stepping over bodies without losing their balance.
Oh my
Their
gosh.
losses were hideous, but they bore them as if they were nothing, as if they themselves were already the walking dead. Get another 15% of our artillery firing on the third column. Just
They're
the
like,
third.
oh no, oh
The
no,
commander
oh no,
told
oh no.
his artillery officer. The clone nodded and turned to see the work be done. Soon, death was raining thickly down upon the first ranks of these uncaring soldiers, blasting them apart, searing through them as medium laser cannons scythed into their ranks. 65 felt a smile of relief slip onto his face as the entirety of the first rank
It's too
died
soon.
just as they reached the halfway point,
It's
falling
too
without
soon.
ceremony. Their legacy was left as nothing more than a trampled line of the dead and the mostly silent dying who lay among them. Those that could picked themselves up and attempted to continue their charge, while others did what they could to heft their weapons and fire from where they fell. All but those that managed to pull themselves to the very sides of the bridge were crushed to death under the boots of their brothers in the second rank, and the sight killed any joy 65 had felt.
Yeah,
Already,
right.
the second rank was being mauled to death, but they had walked past the halfway point, which meant
They're
another
gonna
whistle.
get you.
Third rank, ready? For the Emperor! Charge!
Yes, get
65 had
them.
seen this kind of thing before. This was the start of a situation that was about to roll out of his control, and he had to stem the turn now. I want 50% of all of our artillery capacity going to the third bridge. Everything we've already reallocated, plus whatever else we need to get us there. 65 ordered. Sir, General Sakura is relying on that support, the officer said. 65 grit his teeth, eyes focused on the far side of the bridge again. Half rank! Ready!
Get him.
That's
Get 'em,
why we're
boys.
only taking 50%. Now follow my orders, soldier! The commander snapped. Sir, yes, sir, the clone said hastily, relaying the commands. 65 almost held his breath as he watched the orders take effect and breathed out a sigh at the results. The second rank was obliterated in short order, and while the third rank had made progress, it certainly would not be enough now with this new rate of loss. The bridge was almost shaking with the amount of fire being poured onto the wide mouth of the avenue. Idly, his eyes moved back to the rear of the line and bulged in his skull. Death Riders! First cadre! Ready? Came the call. But it was not men who stomped in response. It was horses. A line of
brought
cavalry made
horses!
up of enormous, claw-hoofed
Of
horses,
course they brought
bearing
horses.
more masked men, each one wielding a long lance or spear. They lowered these weapons as the infantry had done with their rifles. Charge! The beasts leapt forward at the command, and 65 struggled to
Lovely.
keep them
I
in
love
view of
this.
his
This is
binoculars.
great.
They ran so fast, like speeder bikes propelled by raw, unnatural muscle. In seconds, they were coming up on the trail of the nearest group of soldiers, and then, with leaps so long and powerful they nearly appeared to take flight, the horses lunged over the entire fourth rank and began gaining on the third. But, despite the metal masks which covered the faces of the speeding beasts, they were mostly naked animals, and 65 had faith that they too would disintegrate in the withering hail of blaster fire and artillery that was, even then, decimating the third rank. He was
horses are
horrified to
tough.
find he was wrong. The
Hans.
horses leapt the thinning remains of the third rank and began to weave. Looking carefully, 65 could see that the beasts performed these maneuvers without the need of the riders to direct them.
Oh,
The riders
sick.
focusing on bracing their lances and keeping balance as the animals bounded to and fro, leaving trails of blaster fire in their
Okay,
wake.
that's sick though.
Those
That's
caught
so
in
sick.
crossfire or blasted by the artillery rain showed incredible resilience, either shrugging off the
Wow.
wounds completely or requiring an absurd amount of trauma to put down. Nothing exemplified that more than the two-legged horse. Now riderless, it
the
had
legs.
suffered a
I don't
near
like the
direct
legs.
strike from a sniper tank, which had taken the back half of its body clean off. Its intestines had snagged and pulled free, but the beast seemed not to heed its
No
own
way!
destroyed
What the
body
heck?
in the least. Blood gushing from its rent form as it galloped forward on just its front legs.
No.
The sound the beast made into its metal faceplate was
Wait a
almost as
second.
horrible.
No. There's no way. No. There's no way. No. Tell me that can't happen. There's no way. I'm learning a lot about Krieg today, and their horses are jacked too? It can. Yes way. What? I'm so confused. What's down? Thank you for the super chat. I don't know what it said. Maybe if you rephrase it so it doesn't get bonked by a mod, I don't know what you said, but thank you for the super chat. Survived a nuke and mutate. What the heck? It's Krieg. What did I expect? I didn't expect the horse to have its guts hanging out and it to be running with its only front 2 legs. Like, even the balance on that. Like, what? And the blood loss. The blood loss. I don't even... Good times, war crimes. Yes. Okay, you're right. You're right. What the heck? I don't know much about Krieg and Kriegers. I read an art, like, I read the whole wiki, but, like, that doesn't give me all the context I need to know. Okay. Okay, wow. Wow, that's a good Hans. That's a good Hans. I said they don't stop coming. Oh, yes. And they don't stop coming. They just keep going. Oh my. Okay, well. That's terrifying. But I love it. Good haunts. Good haunts is. I'm sorry, we'll continue. The Krieg are glorious. Good. Good to know. I mean, I knew that, but I didn't realize that, I guess.
Horrible as the sight of its charging form. 65 found himself transfixed, but then he noticed the artillery fire around the abomination thinning and realized how close it and the others of its kind were getting to the barricades.
Dun, dun,
Oh, struck. Get the fire squads ready to take their shots. Tell them to be careful not to hit the back of the fortifications, but tell them to expect possible enemy assaults getting around the barricades. He ordered. The commander looked back towards Bridge 2 and cursed again. The battle was going well, but it was still going. He reached into his belt and pulled out his second detonator. Tell the defense forces at Bridge 2 to break off and get ready. He started to say, but it was too late.
Dun, dun, dun.
The Death Riders had reached the fortifications, most of their number still intact and fighting, but they did not deal any death onto the men of the barricades. Well, most of them didn't. The two-legged horse threw itself into one of the firing emplacements, even as the creature itself was turned to ribbons by it.
Oh.
Its speeding corpse collided with the gun, dislodging it and crushing the clone who had been manning it.
Dude!
The others, however, leapt over the whole defense force, landing behind them and continuing their charge. But what were they charging at, if not the troopers? The answer was obvious. The sniper tanks. 65 looked at his infantry command officer and shoved the detonator into the man's hands. Take this! Get all the men manning the second bridge defense here! Now! Activate the charges when they are clear, then pick up a rifle and help me! He yelled. The clone nodded.
I gotta do this myself.
Turned to his opposite side as he climbed down from the top of the cannon. You! Sound the alarm! We are about to be attacked! He ordered the artillery officer, who now stood beside him. The clone saluted and did as ordered while 65 strapped himself into the turret and activated it. The servos of the turret came alive, and the targeting display filled his view, a display he quickly manipulated to hone in on the advancing steeds. They were charging past the fire squads now, who opened up with their flamethrowers, catching nearly a quarter of the advancing horsemen in the fiery maws of their weapons.
I think he's gonna join his pod brother really, really soon.
The Imperials stopped, both beasts and riders advancing forward with the same ferocity they had displayed before being set ablaze. He set the cannon to auto-load his shots, which would give him the quickest rate of fire on his slow gun, and honed in on his first target, the only rider among them whose face was bare. Though the riders were cast in shadows, the clouds now having obscured the Axumite sun completely, he could see that his target was a woman, and likely the leader of this charge. He had already seen how ineffective targeting their leader was when it came to blunting the charges of these masked men. But that still meant that she was as good as any other target. He pulled the trigger. The cannon thunked and fired, its solid shell spiraling as it pierced the air in a high-pitched howl of death. But the horse leapt clear of the shot, and the shallow crater he had created availed him nothing. He grit his teeth, trying to fire again, only to receive a red warning reticle which reminded him that the gun was not ready for the next shot. The ball turrets in front of the walker began to open fire, strafing and cornering 2 of the riders, having far more luck by combining their efforts than he was having alone.
Ooh.
65 found her again, and fired just as the rolling sound and shockwaves of the Baradium charges rocked everything around them.
I think he's gonna miss her. Yep.
Blasted! He yelled, kicking the console and unstrapping himself, climbing onto the side of the gun and down until he was standing on top of the walker's cockpit. The clone commander grabbed his DC-15A, which was slung around his torso, and braced it in one arm as he used his offhand to draw his blaster pistol. No sooner had he managed it than the first 3-legged sniper tank fell to the ground not far from him.
Yikes.
First rocked by a sudden explosion before toppling over. It was the lances. They were explosive. The riders would rush by, jamming their weapons into the third supporting leg of the sniper tanks, breaking the heads off and riding away moments before they detonated, throwing the walker to the ground. And then he saw 3 riders coming for him and his 6-legged ATTE.
Oh
They
no.
had no way of easily toppling something like this, so he knew they would aim for the cockpits in the front. And that was why he had positioned himself there. Compensating for the speed of his bolts, with experience and rate of fire,
Ooh.
65 began blasting with both weapons, veering them into the path of the first rider. His high-powered shots blew small, circular troughs into the ground as 65 tried to chase and catch the speeding Imperial with his weapons. Crying out in furious elation when he finally managed it, blowing the rider away, though the beast charged on. But he paid the animal no heed. It was the lances and their bearers that he was concerned with. The commander oriented onto the next masked
Oh, but
rider,
did he get her,
this
though?
one
I
blazing with
don't know
fire
about
as
that.
a result of the flamethrowers. 65 began pelting the imp and his beast with shots. But despite this, the man did not die, and he did not falter, no matter how brutal the rain of punishment that assailed him became. In the end, the charging warrior was stopped by the ball gunners beneath the commander, who clipped the horse's legs out from under it, causing the beast to begin to fall and pitch forward.
Ooh.
Maddeningly, the rider managed to rise on his saddle and threw himself forward the instant before the war beast beneath him fell and rolled to an agonized death.
Okay, that's
Lance
kind of cool
still in
though.
hand, body aflame, he seemed to lunge with his weapon thrust out, though still he did not cry out or scream. Not that doing
Dude,
so would
that's-
have saved him from Commander 65's continuing hail of blaster fire.
That's
which
unnerving.
slammed
Oh my
into
gosh.
The Imperial cultist the moment he lost the ability to duck and weave. However, the lance still flew forward and struck one of the ATTE's 6 legs, blowing it off and causing the tank to jerk and list to the left. 65 found himself sliding down the flat roof of the cockpit, and his eyes widened as the third rider came upon them. He tried to fire at it, but his shots were wild and inaccurate, as were those of the ball gunners. Without thinking, he roared and threw himself forward moments before the enemy's exploding lance smashed into the cockpit of the walker. The explosion helped to propel him through the air as his path came to intersect that of the third rider, dropping his rifle and letting it hang by its strap as he extended his arms. His soaring tackle connected a moment later and threw the rider clean off the horrific horse which bore the Imperial into battle. They both hit the ground hard and rolled in the churned, loamy earth. 65 rose first, head swimming, utterly disoriented as chaos reigned all around him. The tank crews were doing their level best to fight off the sudden flash assault, but they were unprepared.
Yeah, no,
Without speeder bikes of their own, catching and killing the riders was proving more than difficult, and walkers were dropping and exploding left and right. He was so dazed by the sight that he almost didn't react in time to avoid being pulverized. The rider he had knocked off the horse had come for him.
Yep.
Unmasked, face set in a furious, bloodthirsty grin as she curved her enormous, sparking fist down towards him.
Oh,
He
that's
threw himself
terrifying.
out of the way just in time, her blow causing a flash of light and a cascade of
Oh,
dirt to
gosh.
rain down all around them. She withdrew her fist from the crater she had created and turned to face him again, her sadistic expression appearing even more shockingly crazed in person than it had depicted over the targeting computer of the turret. "You!" 65 yelled, raising the blaster pistol still clutched in his hand and firing. She growled like an animal and swept her fist in front of her, the sparking oversized gauntlet there shimmering as it absorbed the blaster bolts. Her other hand whipped up and out, wielding one of the thick, bizarre bolt pistols of the Imperial Command class. He kept firing to keep her from taking steady shots, but he felt the rush of death thrill his entire system as he leapt up, zigzagging as he fired. He could feel the showers of dirt tossed up by the exploding ammunition of her weapon.
I would hate to fight her.
Could feel the shocks of the stone and metal shrapnel scrape and scratch against his armor as he moved and fired to stay alive. But then she shot right where he planned to step, and while the bolt had detonated before he had moved his foot there, it had succeeded in creating a heated slurry out of the earth. And as he pressed his weight down, the commander found himself slipping, falling, and leaving him helpless before the muzzle of her gun. But, to his surprise, the shot she sent to finish him swung wide. A small hail of blaster bolts rained into her from the left, making her scream as she was sent sprawling to the earth. Her
You
gun
got
arm
saved
cooked
by
to
a Jedi.
ruination. The infantry officer ran forward, a long blaster rifle held out as he approached, shooting the Imperial a few more times to keep her down before coming to his commander, helping him up out of the dirt. He saluted to 65, not waiting for acknowledgement as he began to report. Second half of the defense group is heading here now, sir, even as we speak. First half is still holding the bridge. 65 nodded and slapped the man's shoulder pad, elated to be alive. Good. Call in the medical assault ships. We're going to have a lot of wounded, and we may need the support besides, the commander said. The officer saluted again and began relaying the orders. 65 took the time to survey the battle, and, after a few pained moments of observation, wished he hadn't. The Flame Company was uselessly chasing horses around along with the survivors of the tank crews and what few troopers had still been here. The defense force would arrive soon, but until then, they had almost no way of stopping the cavalry running amok. Already, 65 could see that they had used up most, if not all, of their lances, and had switched to swiping at men with sabers and firing pistols with their free hands. He and his men needed some kind of ace, a pincer, something to counterattack with. Also, tell the ATTEs on the other side of the chasm, 65 added, a plan starting to form in his mind. To come in from behind the enemy force, and the commander was cut off as the officer in front of him was suddenly blasted into 1,000 pieces. The force of the blow which dismembered the clone enough to send 65 himself falling back a few feet. He scrambled in the dirt, wiping at the gore covering his visor as he looked up at the form that loomed over him. Dyed red by the blood and backlit by dark, roiling clouds which churned and hummed with distant lightning, the female commissar that he had watched his officer put down staggered into view. Blood dripped from her chin, and half her face was seared. Her gun arm hung limply, clearly useless at her side, and
I didn't hear no bell. I didn't hear no bell.
The uniform around her torso was pockmarked with blaster burns, which revealed the cracked and hissing ceramite armor beneath. Though her expression was still one of unremitted bloodthirst, she was no longer grinning. "Disgusting slave replicate!" She spat, each word slathered in malice. The deranged Imperial dragged herself forward, and he raised his pistol, opening fire on her. The woman in red snarled and blocked the shots easily, staggering closer and then halting, a look of mortal fury coloring her face. 65 wondered what had happened until he saw the white armored boots begin to filter into his vision. He looked around and found the defense group had finally arrived, the men surrounding him, rifles out and aimed towards her. She staggered back, her leg, which had been clearly wounded in the volley, almost giving out with the movement. His troopers helped him up, and 65 aimed his pistol at the woman.
They haven't shot her yet?
Murderous cultist! He spat back at her. Her burnt face flushed, and she staggered forward, falling to one knee with the...
I'm sorry. I know her face is flushing in anger that she's being called a cultist, because that's insulting, very insulting. But my first thought was she like blushed because she's like, "Oh, you really think so? You really? Like, oh, that's the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me." Like, She was definitely mad because if you know about Chaos and the Chaos has cultists, and then this guy calls you a cultist, you're like, I'm nothing like those. I'd be pissed. But, like, I'm sorry. Flushed? I don't think of, like, being flushed with anger. Yeah, really? You mean it? You mean it? I'm like, oh my goodness, that's so sweet. Here, hang on, let me... Wait. You mean it? You mean it? You really think I'm awful? And I'm, like, dedicated and devoted? Yeah? I'm sorry, that made me laugh. That made me laugh, even though that wasn't the that wasn't the intended goal. It's funny. It's still funny. Anyways, back to it. Back to it. You really think I'm a disgusting extremist? That's the nicest thing anyone's ever said. Yes. Yes, queen. Yes, queen. Okay. Back to it.
The act, her weaponized fist sparking and pulsing, but unable to reach him. 65 removed his blood-streaked helmet, handing it to the man next to him as he sneered at her.
Oh, come on.
She screamed her defiance in response, and he silenced her cry with one shot.
No!
The woman dropped backward into the dirt, never to rise again.
No!
Her fury branded on her face as clearly as the hole in her head.
Dang,
All
she was
around
cool,
them,
though.
The rest of the defense force was already engaging with and hunting
Dang
down
it.
the maddened cavalry. The next several minutes saw the clones massing to corner and drag down each and every single one of the Imperial horsemen, none of whom ever chose to retreat, despite ample opportunity to do so.
Yeah.
By the time the last of them had been blasted to death, much more time had passed than 65 would have considered acceptable. Soon, a new officer was selected to take the place of the man the mad woman had killed, and he stood by awaiting orders. Looking about, the commander could see that spirits were shockingly low. The artillery had been devastated, much of the command staff killed, and the barricades were moments away from meeting the ranks of the enemy in close quarters. Despite the successes thus far, things had become suddenly bleak, and above them all, rumbling clouds which sparked and flashed began to release the very first drops of what was sure to be another of Axum's freezing rains. 65 grit his teeth and stepped forward.
Looks like
Come
a
on,
bad
troopers.
day for
Do I
rain.
need to remind you of the strategic importance of our position here? He gestured with his pistol towards the shining buildings of Azure City, now lit by their internal lights as the rumbling storm stole the daylight. Look back there! See those buildings? They are full of the people we are here to save. This whole planet is! Our mission is to take this city and take it swiftly. Being down on ourselves is a luxury the Republic cannot afford. We are the key to the General's assault. The other battalions are counting on our support. If we fail, everyone fails. Do you all understand this? Sir, yes, sir, the men around him roared. Then get your fire back. We have hard work ahead, and it's only going to get harder. Defense teams, move to reinforce the barricades and pull back the wounded. Fire teams, form a defensive line and defend what's left of our artillery. We are fighting without their support from now on. Everything that is left needs to go to General Sakura. Are you ready? Sir, yes, sir, they said again. Commander 65 raised his hand and clenched his fist as if to catch the falling rain, which was, even then, beginning to blanket them all, turning the dirt into mud, and burying the Commissar's broken body under fresh slurries of liquid earth. We are the clones of Camino, the soldiers of the storm. We will save the Republic, no matter the cost. Now, move out!
I'm so sad. I'm so sad that she died. That was sad. I'm like, oh man. She was kind of cool though. I mean, okay, she's a little crazy. She's a little crazy, but let me tell you, I do admire her balls. She's very ballsy. I admire that greatly. She was another crazy person, gone too soon, pulled from this world. Chat, she didn't live long enough for you guys to fix her. So just so you know, just think about it. Yeah, I'm sorry. She was very cool, but you know, it's okay. I don't know, the speech from 65 was honestly, I'm used to Warhammer speeches, so I was just like, a speech, okay. It's like, we got hard work ahead of us. I'm like, yeah, what else? Is there anything else that's new? It's always hard in the Imperium. So any other speech, I'm like, whatever. She's with the Emperor now. Yes, she did her job. She did her job, and she did it well. She did it well. Okay, this one is a dark transmission. I don't know what these acronyms are. Ooh. Jabim. Okay. Is it really eerie if I don't have my bongos? I'm sorry. That was the stupidest thing. That getting clipped out of context just sounds so funny to me. I'm sorry. All right, let's continue. Let's be serious here.
The only thing they fear is him.
Oh, let me turn that up. Hang on. It's a little quiet. Let me go back.
The only thing they fear is him. We watched as the Horde overwhelmed the very best and most advanced machinery and weapons technology that we could muster against the opposition. It was useless. They moved too quickly. They cared not for themselves, only sought out the blood of humanity. They were willing to sacrifice their own to get to the heart of our world. Ooh. We slaughtered thousands and millions more followed. But then he came. He cut through them like a sickle through a field. His fury surpassing their own. He is faster, more relentless. Subject analysis of January 24th, 2163. Show his blood type is AB positive.
Did they capture Space Marine?
Blood samples that there are foreign bodies present of unknown origin. He is male with a genome that makes him very much a member of the human race.
They caught one.
The enhanced strength, speed, and athleticism would indicate otherwise.
Oh.
I cannot, as a contributing member of the scientific community, agree with the assumption by some of my colleagues that he is, for lack of a better word, a god, an avenging angel, the right hand of doom, here to save humanity from its sins.
That propaganda, though. Dang. She's been propaganded really fast and really hard. Whoo.
Maybe he represents humankind's rage. Their will to persevere, to overcome that which would threaten our survival. He is uncompromising, a relentless being of violence that knows no mention of the hesitation shown by our many leaders and politicians during our time of judgment. And with him lies our salvation. For as he gains in strength, so do they fall in numbers. The priests command the armies to the north and south, but he controls the fight. The inner circle of death is where he resides, hunting them at the far reaches of the earth and beyond. I am a believer now. The spear that stabs at the heart of our attackers, and those that would seek to harm us should feel warned. For there is only one dominant life form in this universe, and it carries a steel-barreled sword of vengeance. All hail.
Oh boy. See, there we go. Lazarus Rising. Is there more? Is there more? Is there more? Oh, preview of season 2. Okay, well, we're not going to watch the preview because we can watch more episodes. I really liked that voice actress. She was nice. I liked her. Very cool. She nearly did say the line. I know. Okay. Because this next episode, so here's what we're probably going to do. We're going to watch one more episode. And then we'll call it, and we'll start from episode 13 next time. Next week is the plan. So, I need to use the restroom really fast before we continue. I'm saying one more right now. I have things to do. So, see, it is a 2-hour episode, so I think that's fair. So, I'm going to get another do because I feel like it, and I will be right back, okay? Okay? I'll be right back. And we'll watch one more episode. Okay. Okay, I'm back. We will continue. We will continue. You know, at some point you're going to be like Chach and do an 8 to an 11-hour stream. It's only a matter of time. I think I did... What was my longest stream? It was for my birthday back in June. I think I did an 8-hour... I think I did an 8-hour stream then. It was 6 to 8 hours, something like that. I don't remember how long it was. It was 5 hours? I thought it was longer than that. No, I thought it was longer than that. Someone get me numbers on that, please. I don't remember. I think I did it on YouTube and on Twitch. So if you go back to my birthday, June 21st, I thought it was more than 5 hours, really? Gosh, that stream felt like it took forever, so, oh. No, I'll do one day. Just today is not that day. Today is not that day. I have done 6-hour ones, though, for, like, other, like, Baneblade and other painting streams. Birthday one went on for a long time? Yes. Yes, but we've done longer painting streams. Anyways, let's continue. Open my do. Eh. The breathing. Hang on. Did I just get more gifts? Who did this? Wait a sec. Wait. Yo, Daduke, I don't know what your username is on this side of things, but Daduke, thank you so much for the magnets and the and for the Blood Angels hat. Thank you so much. I just checked my phone, and thank you for the throne gifts. That's very sweet of you. I'm going to add a little note. Hang on. Pin message. Hang on. I should just put this up at the beginning of stream. I'm sorry. Let me... There we go. Pin. I just... Yeah, so... There we go. No, there. Cool. Great. It's set up now. Perfect. Okay, and I heard subtitles should be on for this one? Okay, I'm turning them on. I like the breathing. ASMR, where I pretend I'm breathing into a gas mask.
He felt dragged out, his breath rushing, wheezing in and out of his mask. The air was becoming moist and frigid, and through the scream and boom of weapons fire, the sound of approaching rain marching across the metal of Azure City could be heard. His flesh was terrified, and his limbs shook hard with both exhaustion and more. Above him, the black clouds roiled and flashed, but it was not just lightning which wove in and out from between them, the aerial battle over the ground forces having moved almost directly over the park. His mind was horrified, filling and then overflowing with emotions, sensations, and thoughts. Before him were the barricades of the enemy and the inescapable honor of his duty as a corpsman. Above all of that, the spinning and often burning forms of Imperial and Republic aircraft, which fell in balls of hateful flame, descended in wide variants around the multitude of spires below them, crashing and exploding like man-made meteors.
The smell of caustic fuel and singed metal was so thick it almost seemed to impede his forward movement, only helping the fear which chewed at his body and devoured his mind drill ever deeper. And yet, in spite of this, 1313 was in the throes of elation. His spirit soared such that he barely felt the pain in his bruised legs or the weight of his gear as his aching, booted feet pounded down on the broad, pale metal avenue of the alien hive city. Bolts flew past him, coming so close as to sear the processed and oiled leather which composed most of his mask. He didn't even try to dodge anymore. 1313 was part of the 5th rank, first row. He had been forced into the former,
he doesn't dodge
but had
anymore.
been granted
Oh my
the
gosh.
latter at his silent request. Though a scant few of the 4th rank had managed to reach the barricades, the true task fell to him and his. He would either die gloriously drawing fire away from others, or he would kill gloriously by vaulting the first barricade and falling upon the foe with zeal. The Krieger had wisely chosen a section of the barricade that was not glowing, but knew that he would not be the only one to select it. He had no intention of getting jammed at the choke point, and to avoid that there was only one thing he knew he could do. Be the first one there, the first one over. Naturally,
I love that.
That meant he had to run
I love
faster,
that.
and equally naturally, that prevented him from dodging or otherwise impeding himself. He could only speed up, never slow down, not when he was so close, so very close. And, as naturally as everything
He
else
says,
mentioned
"I have
thus
to go
far,
fast." Zoomies.
1313 knew beyond the shadow of a doubt that all his brothers around him would have come to the exact same conclusion.
It's just an unspoken competition. Unspoken. They're just, I have to be there first. Otherwise, because then I can do glorious stabbing. Kybernicus, thank you so much for gifting Taro a sub. Oh my gosh, I can't. Oh, and I don't know if I said this one. Dino Fan, thank you for gifting one to Old Man Lives. I think it's Lives, as in live stream.
He was aided in his attempt by the fact that he was the fastest man in his platoon, despite being a fresh recruit from the death world of his decanting. He was impaired by the equally true fact that he had nearly broken his legs falling to rescue the Major earlier that—
No! It's not this guy! Oh my... Okay, no, it's not the one who broke his legs. It's one of the other guys. Dude. Man has probably, like, stress fractures in his legs, and he's gonna run on them. Wow.
that day. But the combination of both was what ensured his success. Had he been faster, as several of his brothers were, he would have been targeted en masse by the focused fire of the gleaming white soldiers who huddled behind their emplacements. But had he been slower, his hand would not have been the first to land on the lip of the barricade. The clone standing there had fired a volley at another Krieger who had been just in front of 1313 and had not been fast enough to catch the second guardsman after killing the first. The corpsman did not scream or cry out, focusing all of those things into his body and purpose as he vaulted the barrier, one hand holding his lass as he braced the butt of the weapon in the crook of his arm while the other hand landed and pushed against the wide lip of the barrier in question. He didn't make any noise more overt than a grunt as he planted a hard kick into the clone trooper's chest, knocking the Republic soldier back and creating space for himself to land. The clones beside him swung to face him and fired. The first shot flew wide as the head of the clone who shot it blackened, the soldier screaming as his flesh and brain cooked in a spray of last shots that came from beyond the barricade. The other shot was much more precise, but 1313 managed to duck it by charging forward, bracing his lasgun in both hands and aiming the bayonet towards the enemy as he did. The clone he had kicked was recovering swiftly from his stagger, but his DC-15A blaster rifle was heavy and had a very long barrel. He swung the blaster down to fire it and did, but the end of the barrel cracked against 1313's hard helmet, firing behind the Krieger as he rushed in. The corpsman almost stumbled into the clone as he thrust forward with the bladed end of his weapon, just managing to catch himself before going down. The Republic soldier cried out, white armor splitting and cracking as hardened Mechanicus-forged steel slid into him.
The shovel.
They both hit the back of the second, taller barricade and collapsed in a tangle. The remaining clone turned to fire, hesitating as he stepped back and tried to safely shoot 1313 despite his proximity to the pained, groaning form of his pod brother. That hesitation cost him as another Krieger vaulted over the same spot 1313 had just come in through, knocking the barrel of the clone aside and beginning a grapple. 1313 did not pause or hesitate as he pulled the trigger of his weapon once, twice, and then a third time, satisfied when the clone ceased its screaming.
Dang, he's
The
hardcore.
Imperial pulled back and away from the Republic soldier as the jerking movements of an all too familiar human death row took possession of the replicate's burnt body. The Krieger turned just in time to watch his own brother, 1315, finishing with his clone combatant.
Oh, it's just numbers.
The two had wrestled to the ground, losing their weapons in the struggle. 1315 had seized the clone's helmet, ripping it away before clasping his gloved hands around the Republic slave's neck. In response, the clone at first clawed at 1315.
It's always nuts. I don't know. I know I don't watch a ton of war movies, and that might be obvious to you. But I always find it interesting when you get to the point where it's no longer weapons in hand, but it's just man-to-man grappling, and just that that like innate survival instinct. Yeah, it's very visceral. I don't know. I find when those are used, it's not always thematic, but it does have like a theme to it. Like, I don't know. I'm probably looking into this way too hard. I'm probably thinking way too hard, but it's where, yeah, barehanded bloodshed like that. It's just like it hits harder. It's like, man, I can't put it into words, but there's just something about it. It's just so primal. Anyways, we'll continue. We'll continue.
Teen's unflinching, masked face before clasping his fists together and raising them.
Oh.
He brought them down again and again on the Krieger's face, cracking the lenses of his mask and damaging the respirator tube, but nothing the clone did could make 1315 release his ever-tightening grip. 1313 busied himself with firing over his brother's shoulder into the ranks of the clones lining the barricades, many of whom were already dealing with Kriegsmen in their midst. When 1315 had finished his grisly work, he looked at 1313 through the empty eye holes of his mask, the lenses completely dislodged. Yellow, bloodshot eyes gleamed in that darkness, and with a nod, 1313 knew to move forward and take point. The double-layered barricades meant that, even now, they were still losing Kriegers, but as more and more of them made it to the first layer of barriers, the difference was becoming clear. Moving among these confines, even when under fire, was their speciality, and the clones stood no chance within close range. Some of the Republic's sergeants and other officers appeared to have requisitioned some potent combat knives prior to the battle, but the rank and file had no such armament, and it showed. The Imperials, by contrast, drew entrenching
Fixed
tools,
bayonets.
combat knives, and bore their bayoneted rifles as they poured into the close confines behind the barricades, the touch of their forward forces like acid against the pristine white defenders. The roiling clouds above them released blasts of cold wind, and soon rain as well. The approaching and then thickening sheets of freezing water reflected the light of lasfire and blaster bolts as it swept over the embattled positions. Fog rose from the heated bridge, its surface pocked with weapons fire, and from the fighting soldiers of either side, the mouths of their weapons hissing and sizzling, mixing steam and smoke into a gray miasma which stalked the battle like a specter. The
I like this
repeating
art.
blaster cannons began
It's
to
really
fire
cool.
into their own first barricade more and more as the
got
death
that, like,
corps of Krieg
classic
cut into and through several
World War I,
positions
World War
along
II
the first
style.
line. 1313 heard the cavalry horns blow again, but knew that he and his had been the last of the charging infantry ranks. In other words, Major Lazarus's plan depended entirely on what they could do, here, now, using only what had managed to survive the butchery on the bridge. 1313 and 1315 were facing down a massing group of clones who had managed to repel the Kriegers gunning for their positions. Having successfully weathered the death charge into their defensive line, and having many, many more forces within the barricades than beyond them, the clones turned their full attention to their flanks. One line of clones lay straight down on the ground, another line kneeled over them, and the last line stood over the second, all of them bearing their long rifles and creating overlapping ranks of blue fire, which they sent into the Kriegers at either side of them. 1313 and his brother hit the ground hard, ducking the shots and aping the clones as they lay on their bellies, barely avoiding the first volley as they returned fire with their own. 2 clones dropped, but many, many more shot back. 1313 could smell the acrid stench of his and his brother's greatcoats catching fire as several shots found the prone Imperials, burning pain blossoming on his back, left arm, shoulder, and head. His flak armor negated most of the initial damage with the help of the thick, chemically treated coat, and the shot on his head glanced clean off his thick helmet, having struck at an angle. But he had completely lost the use of his left arm, the limb having suffered several strikes and becoming entirely unresponsive, a still mass of hidden, cooked flesh and pain.
That's unfortunate.
Almost as fast, 1313 felt his stim implant activate, filling him with numbing heat which bore down on the pain which now assailed him. Not that it mattered. Without his left arm to steady his las rifle, he could do little more than pull his weapon's trigger, which he had not stopped doing anyway. But even had his arm remained functional, there was no way he and 1315 could kill all the clones before them. Luckily, they didn't have to, as the second cadre of Death Riders leapt over the barricades
get out of the way.
again,
They will trample
but this
you.
time aiming their lances down, most catching the helmet or torso of a clone as they passed overhead. 1313 watched as one of the vaunted, fatalistic riders soared over the firing ranks of the enemy. The explosive head of his lance caught the head of one of the standing troopers in the center left of the formation, detonating and killing all the standing clones and several of the others while stunning the rest. 1313 was forced to watch helplessly as 1315 finished off the survivors, still able to effectively wield his own lasgun despite the fire he had also taken. Not only that, but other corpsmen soon joined them, taking over the fighting for long enough for 1313 to rise to his knees and assess his damage. From what he could tell, he would live, which was a shame because he could not tell if his left arm was even still attached to his body under the burnt tatters of his coat's sleeve.
Oh shoot.
He did his best to pat out the scattered flames which feebly licked at his chemically drenched uniform and discarded his lasgun before going to 1315. He was in an even worse way, still laying on the ground, his back and shoulders littered with scorch marks and deep burns. 1313 patted down the flames and saw right away why his brother had not risen. The corpsman had received damage to his spine in 2 locations, both around his waist. Both would mean he was paralyzed from that point down. 1313 considered drawing his combat knife and ending 1315 swiftly, but his brother's words halted him.
"Prop me up and go!"
The Krieger rasped from behind his mask.
"Are you sure? You're paralyzed,"
said 1313.
He can still shoot.
He continued, but was cut off.
"An easy death is no death. My arms still work,
Yeah,
which means I can
buddy.
still kill.
Yeah,
Prop me
buddy.
up and let me earn my death,"
said his brother.
Oh, okay. That's
1313
kind of
nodded
goes
and
hard
hefted
though.
1315 with his good arm, pulling him out of the way as to not be trampled. More and more of their brothers were coming this
I
way,
love that, though.
shooting and charging in standard silence. Those who had been issued grenades tossed them over the high walls of the second barricades, buying themselves time to fight the clones here in the first row as other corpsmen sought to breach the second. He set his brother down against the wall of the second barricades, kicking 1315's legs in to help support his awkward sitting posture.
The crippled Krieger clutched at his own gun with one hand as he was moved, but handed 1313 something with his other hand when the younger Krieger moved away to examine his work. Held tightly in the Corpsman's gloved hand was a silver-plated las pistol with the words "Krieg Sind" engraved in extravagant lettering on the side of the barrel. At a glance, 1313 could see that it was an overcharged weapon, a hotshot variant of the standard las pistol, the kind of gun a quartermaster would never issue to men of their rank.
How did you get that?
1313 took the gun with his one good hand, flipping it into his grip before looking back at 1315. The Krieger offered no explanation. He merely gestured with a jerk of his head for his brother to get a move on, and with a nod, he did. With the combat stims running through him, 1313 found the dead weight of his flopping limb to be more annoying and hindering than painful.
You know it's attached
but
then.
He did his best to ignore it either way as he chased his fellow brothers up the line, looking for a way over the second barricades. Soon enough, the line of Imperials reached a hole burned into the wall, clearly created by the draconic blasts of a melt-a-gun. The men funneled in and were met immediately with slaughter. The clones had repositioned, using the time bought by their first defensive line to distance themselves and take cover behind the stacked trunks of the trees which had once adorned the park. They moved fluidly and intelligently, retreating without shame and redeploying without mercy. While the Death Corps of Krieg was more than willing to bear the losses of their assault, they simply did not have the numbers to maintain their high attrition. More than half of the clones defending the bridge were still alive and fighting, and the Kriegers who had survived the bridge crossing were barely a handful in comparison.
Yeah.
The Death Riders leapt and bounded around and behind the enemy, but their lances were spent and their cadre was few in number compared to the clones they needed to disrupt. So, try as they might, their pressure alone was not enough to break the Republic's finest. 1313 charged through the choke point, trying to place his ruined arm in front of himself, hoping it would provide some
shield.
kind of protection as he ran. He could not tell if it worked, as the man behind him took a shot in the eye and dropped down forward, bearing 1313 down along with several others. They struggled and kicked before a rain of blaster bolts pelted into the squirming pile of soldiers, making them still. 1313 was trapped nearest at the bottom of the pile, though the dead had already clogged the area so heavily that he was certainly not touching the ground. He pulled his pistol hand free of the corpses pressing in and around him and began to take shots. As he did, other holes were burned and blown into the second barricades, and more corpsmen rushed through, helping to disperse the fire, though some clones did notice him and began shooting back. However, it was difficult for the clones to know which body in that pile belonged to the arm that was shooting at them, and while several clones scored headshots, it was on the dying men who were not attacking. 1313 paid them back with shots of his own. Finally, one of the Kriegers managed to get close enough to successfully pitch a grenade into their cover, scattering the clones and buying 1313 the time he needed to struggle free of the pile around him. There were so few of his brothers left that they did not even trample him as he extricated himself, though perhaps this was due instead to how clogged his choke point had become, with men piled nearly to groin height behind him.
Groin height? Oh my gosh.
Marveled at his terrible luck. How on Krieg's damned surface had he managed—
Dang it, I can't believe I'm still alive. I'm so mad. I did not want to be alive this long. How dare I survive? How dare I be lucky? It should have been me. It should have been me. It should have been me.
To survive this long. It didn't matter, he told himself, as he could plainly see that the clones were starting to push them back, something which only happened just before defeat became inevitable. After all, Kriegers did not retreat. Not ever.
They do not.
He saw the clones that had been driven away returning to their positions, some sending wide shots at him, which he ducked, running towards them instead of seeking cover among the fallen around him. The corpsman opened fire, his bad arm flopping back and forth, his combat stims starting to wear thin as the rain continued to pelt his uniform and mask. He couldn't tell how effective his shooting was through the mist and rain, but he hoped to kill some of them before they honed in on him. Time seemed to slow as he watched the long spines of their Xenos weapons barrels protrude from over the logs and branches of the fallen trees. He watched as one fired, and then another, and another. He tried to duck, but his feet felt uncoordinated, his adrenaline also beginning to fade now, leaving him devoid of much of his strength. Pain was flooding him from where it had before been staunched, but it was not doing it fast enough to prevent him from trying to complete his charge. Shots sailed over and around him, singeing his cheek and good elbow as the other barrels found him and prepared to open fire. And then he watched as the barrels withdrew or fell away. From the leftmost flank of the clones, a roar came. A defiant cry that the Krieger had not expected to hear in this battle.
Cadia stands!
The war cry was accompanied by the flashing of weapons fire as soldiers wearing Cadian green and tan laid into the clones from their exposed flank.
They came from one of the other columns, I'm sure.
Up their shots well in advance of the war cry, and though the clones reacted with admirable speed, it was far from enough as grenades were launched, las shots fired, and autoguns unloaded. The Republic's men were cut down in a few scant heartbeats, and when 1313 managed to stumble around the logs, he found himself aiming at corpses and allies and dropped the muzzle of his gun to point
1313, you have to
down.
keep living.
Without speaking, the Krieger's eyes followed the path from whence the soldiers had come, seeing other small squads flanking and ambushing the Republic's positions, though the clones were already reacting en masse to the new threat. 1313's sight led him to the skeletal ruin of the second bridge, and there his hidden eyes widened as he saw what was left of the Cadian assault crossing over the exposed beams and struts of the unguarded,
yeah, I figured something happened there.
Avenue. Rifles and weapons held up over their heads or borne on their backs, the Cadians tiptoed in tenuous lines, walking like ants as they balanced and marched over the narrow crossings afforded to them. Some clones began to fire in their direction, but the only ones exposed now were the tail end of the survivors, and those who had made the journey already quickly honed in on the offending clones, providing cover for their kinsmen. 1313 felt elation and pain flood into him in near equal portions, and he staggered, almost dropping his weapon as he caught himself on the wooden barricade.
Congratulations, you've been promoted. You have life.
Bit by bit, the pain in his body was winning out, filling him up and driving out even the chance to feel or think anything else. The Krieger suddenly felt a swelling nausea fill him near to bursting, and dropped the pistol, his one good hand working at the seals of his mask. He managed to yank the whole thing off his face mere seconds before he threw up his morning starch rations and protein, groaning as his legs threatened to collapse beneath him. The cold rain fell on his face, washing away his sweat and the sick that had spilled over his chin and lips. He felt someone tugging at him roughly, jarring him as he was forced down onto the logs, made to sit as many hands grabbed him from several places. He tried to resist, his vision blurry and filling with red,
us heal you.
But his one good arm had been
and he's like, no, just let me die. They're like, let us heal you, sir. He has the do not resuscitate.
Strained, and he had not the strength in his legs to kick very hard. Something sharp jammed into his neck, at the base of his shoulder, and once more the pain receded, though the warmth of his standard combat stims did not return. Instead, a cold, icy sensation spread from the spot, making him shiver, but bringing his dazed mind a sharp, killing focus. He relaxed, recognizing that the many arms which held him were the myriad mechadendrites of a red-robed tech priest who, even now, was fussing and cutting at the greatcoat sleeve around his ruined arm. As the spider-like form of the machine god's chosen tugged and worked on him like a frenzied mechanic, an armored Cadian approached, addressing the tech priest as she continued her work.
Any advice, Magos? We caught them off guard, but they are adapting pretty quick, and they still outnumber our surviving forces, but...
The man started to say,
by a factor of 3.26, enemy has displayed tendencies towards unified adaptation and organization. Maximum deployable force is currently projected to succeed in only 12.1% of simulated battlefield outcomes. Variables are not sufficiently influential or beneficial to provide an acceptable margin for victory. Processing solution. Processing.
The tech priest said, her voice clearly synthesized, though thickly
I like how it has a
accented
little
in the
accent with
way
it.
of the throne world and its red sister. The
I like the
Cadian
accent, it's
shrugged
nice.
and looked back at his men before looking back at her. Care to say any of that in God? He began to say.
Whoa, whoa.
Processing.
She replied, cutting him
Processing.
off as she continued her callous fleshcraft on 1313. Steel wires spooled out from several of her mechanical arms as syringes and daubs dripping with bitter chemicals darted towards and away from his trembling skin, finding breaches, burns, and all else in short order.
Dang, she's efficient.
Thanks to the anesthetic she had applied to him, the corpsman could mostly only feel pressure and vague stinging. It was nothing like the pain which had been blaring within him before, and he found it easy to hold still, though
He's
he
kind of
did
holding
look
her in
away
place.
from whatever it was she was doing to him. A small flock of servo skulls spun and hovered around them, at least 12 in total, all seeming to orient around the tech priest herself, like
That's
paper
goals.
lamps
Goals
circling
right there.
a cyclone.
I love that.
Solution reduced. Depriving enemy forces of coordination capacity is the most efficient way to upset current statistics.
She said. One of her long mechanical arms stretched and snapped out, snatching a floating servo skull out of the air like a toad's tongue catching a fly. Her limbs began working on it right away, flipping the squirming
She's gonna do a
skull
thing that
over
disrupts,
and
like,
exposing
their-
the mechanical components which
their
had
radio
been
or whatever
crammed
they
into the
use.
vacancies within the human bone.
Their frequencies.
She began to frenzy over the squirming skull in much the same way she was over the Krieger, limbs working with inhuman coordination as casings were unscrewed, components moved and replaced, and new additions applied.
So someone said, I wonder what a group collective noun for servo skulls is. I want to say it's a dedication of servo skulls, or like a duty of servo skulls. I think that's what it would be, personally, because it's got to have the Warhammer vibe to it. So it's got to be something to like their continued service. It's got to be something like that, in my opinion. That's my thought. But I'm interested in hearing other ideas. Acquire? No. No, it's got to cover like servo skulls in like general, because like they do different things. A slave? No, because servo skulls are like highly regarded. Like it is an honor to be a servo skull, so it can't be a slave. An attendance? I don't know. A serving? Boo, not a serving. No, I'm not. The official plural name for multiple skulls is craniums, but like, yeah, okay, but like we're like, nah. An honor of servo skulls? Okay, I kind of like that one. An honor of servo skulls. I really like that one. See, that's kind of the vibe we're going for. No, not anyone can be a servo skull. It's usually a very prestigious and high honor to be a servo skull. Not just anyone becomes a servo skull.
As she did both this and her medical work, she continued speaking.
Dang, she's
The
smart
next
though.
objective is to take the arms and interface him with one of the energy cells that the enemy are using to power their repeating weapons. My predicted models estimate a 72.8% chance that those energy cells will suffice for our purpose.
The Cadian nodded and waved to his men, signaling that they would be moving out very soon. They closed in as he began to speak. What will Tenny Harmus do once we plug him in? he asked.
She named him. That's
finish
cute.
her work on the
That's so cute. I didn't realize that was his name. Yay. No, don't worry about the ramble. Good to have you in, Siri. I hope you're having a good day. No, choir, choir doesn't quite capture it. We'll have to talk about this in the Discord more, because honestly, I want to give it a name. I like an honor, personally. Honor.
The servo skull then, taking it and placing it into the captain's hands, the skull's eye lenses and small grapple claws still moving and clamping the air,
He's like,
but its hovering capabilities having been apparently disabled from whatever alterations had been done to it. Its name, Tenny Harmis, was emblazoned onto a golden plate on its forehead.
It's kind of adorable, though.
Release a multi-frequency broadcast pulse, and will continue to do so for as long as power is maintained and fed into him. This should bring down their comnet.
See, I told you that's what she was gonna do.
Organizational and adaptational capacities by 88.8%.
Can we get
She said.
a servo skull
Right, then we'll get
nightlight?
moving
They're just
to
gonna
it.
plug him into a wall.
The captain confirmed, tucking the skull under his arm and drawing his pistol.
Wait,
She added. With one more harsh tug to his wounded arm, she stood away from 1313, her mechadendrites lifting him back up to a
Take
standing
this man.
position.
It's
He
dangerous
looked
to go
himself
alone.
over, amber eyes widening on his exposed face. The tech priest had amputated
just
his left
chopped off his arm.
an act he somehow hadn't felt in any distinct way. Where before had hung the burnt ruin of his formerly functional limb, now all that remained was little more than a hand span out from his shoulder. The
Dang.
sleeve of his greatcoat
I want
sewn
her, because she's got her 12 skulls, I really wish she'd taken a skull and just attached it to the nub of his arm. I think that would be funny. Just like a little skull on his arm, just like, all right, buddy, you and me together forever.
shot over the stump, hiding the dressing and the flesh it swaddled. The burns and other injuries he had taken had also been located, treated, and bandaged, his uniform having been torn open in the affected areas and then restitched closed once her work had been completed.
I like her.
take
She's
him
cool.
with you. He is a member of the Dead Corps, and has succeeded in fighting his way to the back of the line. If nothing else, he will serve as another body to distract from your own.
He's like, wow,
She
so
said.
grateful, so
The
based,
captain
man.
snapped his eyes from her to the unmasked face of 1313, instantly stunned by what he saw. His jaw tightened, and he
Yeah,
strode towards
it's-
him, bending down to pick up the gun 1313 had dropped earlier.
It's
looking at it
definitely-
and
he's on the
words
younger
written on
side,
it,
I'm sure.
And then at the soldier before him. How old are you, Krieger?
Ye-
The man said.
All right, time to predict. Time to predict. 15.
Though the statement was grammatically a question, it was spoken as an order.
Or is he gonna
and
be 13 'cause he's
snapped a salute with his
13.
one good arm as he answered. 15 solar years, sir.
Yes!
He said
I'm
to the
awesome!
Acadian. The man nodded grimly,
I
looking back
killed
down
it!
at the gun one more time. Are you well enough to fight and not slow us down?
Dang, is this the art that he got done? Or no, it looked like he was missing an arm here, so I was like, huh? Dang. Okay, the reason I guessed 15 was I'm like, it has to be like, obviously it's a kid, but like, it has to be old enough where not everyone's gonna be like super, super appalled. I almost said 16, but I was like, no, it has to be a little younger than that. So I said 15.
He asked. 1313 gave a sharp, decisive nod of his head, holding his salute, blinking the crisp, freezing rain
Dang.
out of his eyes. The man before him nodded once more and flipped the gun in his hand so that the barrel was held between his fingers and the handle aimed towards the Krieger. Then take this and follow me, he said. 1313 broke his salute, taking the gun from his temporary superior and saluting once more.
He's like, "I'm
the captain
ready."
said no more, turning to his men with a whistle and waving them forward as he pulled out
And
a
it's
pair of small
amazing. A
binoculars.
15-year-old's like, why haven't I died yet? I have my life expectancy. I'm I'm the older side of what a Krieger should be. 15 is the usual age most men end puberty. I wouldn't know. I thought it was later than that. I thought like it was like 16 or 17. I'm not a dude, so I don't know. But I would have guessed 16 or 17. Because guys hit it later than girls do, so... Yeah. I was like, 15, that still seems very young. I do not know many... I don't remember too many 15-year-olds that were, like, done with puberty as boys. Like boys. I'm like, no, they are still... they're not developed. Physically, yes, but we never stop being stupid. No comment. No comment.
And began scanning for the nearest emplacement. While he did this, the tech priest used her many arms to take 1313's mask, wrapping it back around his face and securing it tightly while simultaneously taking the half-spent hotshot power pack out of his gun and replacing it with a fresh one.
She's like a mom.
She spoke not at all.
She's like a mom. She's like, just let me take care of it. Let me just did it.
As she did this, the many red lenses of her eyes making it unclear if the tech priest was even looking at the corpsman as she finished and turned away. Beginning to move towards another wounded soldier, a Cadian who had taken a shot to the
She's
gut,
cool,
was
I like
huffing
her.
and cursing behind the others. 1313 hesitated for a moment, but spoke.
Thank you.
The Krieger said to her, not yelling through the rain, but voicing the words
Oh,
nonetheless.
that's nice.
She slowed ever so briefly, one of her arms performing a reverse salute in his direction, though she did not turn and did not stop. It was more than he had expected, and he added nothing to it as he turned to wait for the captain's orders.
Okay, I like her.
He did not have to wait for very long. The captain was just a little taller than he himself was, with dark skin and pale purple eyes. He kept his hair close to the skull, something which was apparent as the man did not wear a helmet. On the back of his head was tattooed the double-headed eagle of the Imperial
That's
Aquila,
hardcore.
barely visible against his black skin and the fuzz of his equally black hair. All right, I've got our target. Stay close and keep your heads down. We are going to follow this line of stacked trees until we are right behind that position over there, he said, indicating towards their target with an outstretched finger. Once there, we're going to rush them. Stow the grenades. We can't use explosives or we'll risk damaging the energy cells. Same goes for flamers. Stow them, the captain ordered. 3 of his squad groaned, slinging 2 grenade launchers and 1 flamer and drawing combat knives and sidearms.
Tell me you like explosions and fire without telling me you like explosions and fire. That would have been me, though. I'd be like, dang it, no flamer? Oh, man. That blows.
All right, stay low, stay light, and stay on my trail. Let's go, he said, and took off, crouching as he went. The squad followed after, the mist and the rain as well as the stacked logs helping to conceal them as they moved up on the first group of clones, who were, themselves, hiding behind wooden barriers, watching to make sure no one snuck up behind the emplacement. But whereas their white and yellow armor practically made them glow among the contrast of the darker trees, the tan and green uniforms of the Cadians and the dark coat of the Krieger with them allowed them to remain inconspicuous as they maneuvered. The squad swung out wide, coming in behind the clones and destroying them in short order. Now in position to charge the emplacement from behind, they had a better idea of what they would be charging into. The firing emplacements were half-domed shells with enough open space in front to allow their repeating blaster free range of targeting. The rear was mostly open and vulnerable, but provided just enough cover to hide behind. The clones inside would be able to hold the position, potentially for long enough for others of their kind to take notice. We got good cover from here, said a corporal. The woman in question was holding a long las rifle, one of the long-shot variety, and was using the scope on the weapon to scout out the entrance. The captain beside her nodded, but said nothing for a moment as he examined the position. While the corporal was on the captain's right, 1313 came up on his left, with all three of them kneeling behind the trees as they peered between the branches, the rest of the squad kneeling or squatting in the thickening mud behind them. "We could take them from here. Probably lose less men," she went on.
They would
Again,
know
the
your
captain
position.
nodded, but frowned, clearly not a fan of the idea despite its merit. "Maybe. But they may have time to call for help in that case, or worse, sabotage the cells. If we do this, we need to do this fast, and... Hey, Krieger, what are you doing?"
Fixing bayonets.
The captain said, but 1313 was already
He's
up
charging?
and
No way.
It was hard.
He says, "I'm so sorry. I need to die. I need to die. I need to get this taken care of. I gotta get the weight off my chest. Pardon me while I just go charge the enemy."
For him to move around without his left arm, it really threw his balance
Keep
off something
going.
terrible, forcing him to lean oddly and walk sideways as he quickly crept up on the position. The firing of the repeater and the falling of the rain were more than enough to block the sound of his approach, and soon he was huddled by the wall, peeking over the edge. They were crammed in there, most of them shooting out through the wide window, moving around the repeater as it swiveled, all of them helping by supporting their men in the first barricade. 1313 wasn't much for planning, but he knew he had to at least chance lasting long enough for his distraction to do more than draw attention to the entrance the captain
Dang,
and the
he is
Acadians
ready.
would be
He's like,
using after him.
"Finish me."
Seeing one clone pull away to reload his long rifle, he moved in, sliding and running right up to the soldier.
Get him!
The clone looked up and was stunned by the sudden appearance of an enemy less than 3 steps from him and snapped his rifle up to fire, but had
Dang.
time for only one shot before 1313 was inside the reach of his long barrel. The shot struck the thick plates on 1313's right shoulder, shattering them, but failing to stop the Krieger as 1313 sent a shot through the
Sick.
clone's right leg. The man cried out in his alien language, and the other clones halted and snapped around, quickly becoming aware of the intruder. The corpsman moved with as much speed as he could, looping around behind the clone he had wounded, pulling them both against the wall near the window, and jamming his gun up under the clone's
Oh,
helmet.
dang.
The Republic soldier collapsed against him, and he fell as well.
This
His
is the
only
coolest
benefits
15-year-old
being that
ever.
The trooper's armored body covered most of his own, and that his lasgun was still firmly pressed against the man's chin. The clones hesitated and then didn't shoot.
Oh,
1313 blinked. He was sure they would both be blasted to pieces after the clones realized he had dared to take a hostage. One of them yelled at the Krieger, but of course 1313 had not been taught how to speak almost any of their language and had not been equipped with an autotrans.
oops.
He had learned a few words, however, to aid in his duties on the planet prior to the counter-invasion. He had not used them once since arriving, but was glad he could use them now.
Bathroom.
1313 said in Galactic Basic, his accent thick, nearly incomprehensible. Though he could not see their faces, he could see their postures, which betrayed their confusion. He tried a different word.
Credits.
He said.
Oh
the
my
confusion
gosh.
continued in all but one of them, who went rigid for a moment and then spun around, yelling something in his Xenos tongue that was probably analogous to, "He's distracting us." The clone snapped around and fired his rifle, catching one of the Cadians in the chest and throwing him back. The Imperial who came in behind the first opened fire with a shotgun, blowing 2 of the clones away, the one who had fired and the one beside him, before the other Imperials stormed in.
That's funny.
The clones turned to meet the attack, but the distraction coupled with how terribly unwieldy their larger guns were in close quarters left them nearly helpless as the Cadians tore into the clone troopers with mid and close-range weaponry. 1313 pulled the trigger of his gun, mercilessly killing the clone he had
Yikes. Oh,
captured and
gosh.
rolling the dead weight off of his body before rising. The captain approached, executing 2 more wounded clones as he did, face flushed, eyes blazing. "You're lucky that little maneuver didn't kill you, crazy
He's like, "No, I'm unlucky. That maneuver didn't kill me." He's like, "Dang it. It was supposed to." Elcott, thank you so much for resubscribing. Oh man, I hope you're having a good time too.
Death-worshipping plank. He slapped 1313's helmet and then turned,
The slap
pointing at
was
his
a nice
Cadians.
touch.
Jackna, patch up Ithric. Gregor, ready flares. The captain ordered, walking to the large, square power cell which fed the repeater. The Imperial officer licked his lips, nervous about even touching machines of any kind, but he ultimately determined Xenos technology deserved less reverence than something born of the machine god's will, and pulled the cable feeding the blaster free. He then carefully set the skull down on top of the crate-shaped power cell.
Oh, good. You're being
The
so
little
kind.
grappler claws protruding from the bottom of the servo skull clanked and wiggled, pulling it up and enabling it to shamble closer to the now vacant output port. 1313 watched as a single mechadendrite slid out of the base of the skull and fumbled about around the port until it succeeded in blindly feeling it out. It inserted itself, and the whole skull went rigid. The thing then spun, holding itself upside down as another protrusion emerged from beneath and behind its grinning teeth. A long rod which unfolded to nearly 2 hand spans high before bending near the end and unfurling a radar-like dish. While that went on, Gregor, a large Cadian man with a grenade launcher slung over his shoulder, withdrew a flare gun and some green flares. With a nod from the captain, he sent the shining beacons flying over their heads, stepping out from under the half-dome to get the shots off. They blazed like green suns in the darkness and rain, calling more Cadians to their position. Nothing more seemed to happen then, at least to the men within the emplacement. But all across the scattered battles still going on, a shift was starting to occur, beginning with a nasty surprise to all clones with active comms, which was to say, all of them. A piercing screech soon filled their earpieces, disrupting fire, causing hesitation, and forcing some clones to toss off their own helmets. The distraction was a boon to Imperials all across the barricades, but more than that was what came after, subtle though it was. Republic forces began to lose their cohesion as communications died abruptly. Individual squads were forced to rely on themselves, when before they had been part of a greater whole. The clones were no strangers to independent thinking, but the sudden switch sent them stumbling, and soon many squads had chosen to tactically retreat and regroup, failing to realize what this would mean for the clones that chose to stay and hold their ground. The result was bloody chaos. Some of the Republic clones tried to take back the emplacement, perhaps having even deduced that the source of the comm jamming was coming from there, but 1313 and the Cadians repelled them each time, and as more minutes passed, more and more forces gathered their position. Finally, most of the clones seemed to settle on a retreat and regroup strategy, and save for the far sides of the bridge, abandoned their barricades, sabotaging the weapons they left behind as they did. This lull in the fighting afforded the scant survivors of the Imperium time to gather and prepare for the counter-assault the clones would inevitably throw back against them. The majority of the Death Corps and Cadian shock troops quickly gathered around the comm jammer, following the flares. The remaining tech priests roamed and roved around the emplacement site like busy insects, using monomolecular blades and plasma torches to cut away chunks of the barricades, ferrying them from the first line and re-cementing them in new defensive positions meant to repel invaders from the opposite direction. Heavy weapons were recovered from the dead, while the wounded were gathered and placed within cover for medics and tech priests to examine and tend. 1313 found himself sitting on a log within the new ring of rapidly forming defenses, his silvered pistol holstered, a protein bar clutched tightly in his one hand. Around him sat the Cadians. He had sought to rejoin the others of his corps, but the soldiers in green had been insistent.
They're
and
like
1313
they're like it's a bunch of extroverts adopting the introvert. That's what happened right there. They just said, "Nope. You're with us now. You cannot resist. You are ours. Sorry. You cannot go back. We have adopted you." Had
found himself too withdrawn and far too exhausted to deny them. They sat in a rough circle around a plasma burner, which provided them with just enough warmth to negate the utter cold of the still falling rain. Above them, the battle in the sky raged on, moving closer, and then farther, and then closer again, fire and lightning descending from the sky with near equal regularity. A Republic gunship fell, spinning from above, firing wildly before crashing 40 meters away from where they sat.
40 meters, that's close!
The crash made most of them flinch, but no one moved or reacted outside of that.
Built different.
So, Krieger, what the hell got into you back there?
Asked one of the Cadians, a woman named Jackna. She wore the red spiral of the Medicae, but seemed little different from the rest in all other respects. Her eyes were a light violet, and her short hair was a burnished orange which stuck out from under her helmet in random, matted tufts. She had her own protein bar, holding the rectangular ration pack with one hand as she pulled the long plastic pin attached to it with the other. Once the pin was pulled free, the packet inflated to the point that it looked like it might burst before a little hole popped open on the end of the bar, ejecting a line of steam which whistled for a moment before petering out. She then peeled the pack open, revealing the gray, puffy substance of the ration, consuming it eagerly. 1313 simply shrugged in response, face still hidden behind his mask. Oh, come on, you really going to be humble? You charged into a nest of enemy soldiers with so much confidence they didn't even know you didn't belong there before you got a hold of one of them. Said another man, Julian. This man was enormous, far larger than everyone barring Gregor, who was just smaller. His head and face were clean-shaven, revealing a motley of scars and burns, as well as his cybernetic eye. The man was on his third ration bar.
Dang.
1313 nodded, but added nothing else, making the man's face fall flat. How about we get his name before we try prying into how he thinks? Asked another woman.
Good
in the
idea.
group, a round-faced Cadian with
But you're
long
gonna be
black
disappointed
hair.
by his name.
She cradled a long-shot lass, even as she ate, though she had loosened her flak armor for comfort and tossed off her helmet, allowing the rain to fall directly onto her.
Oh dang, she's pretty.
Her name was Emiliana, ranked corporal. So, what's your name? I'm sure they give you a name in the Corps. She asked,
a number?
polishing off
How
the
about
rest
that?
of
A
her own
number?
ration
Is that a
bar.
name?
1313 nodded, but did not say anything else right away. A harsh laugh followed that, coming from Gregor, who sat opposite the Krieger. The man was thicker than he was tall, and it was all muscle. His brown hair was cut short, completely shaved on the sides and flat on the top. He smiled an unpleasant, unamused smile.
Oh, he
Don't bother
jelly.
with him, Emiliana. Kriegers don't like to talk or fraternize with non-Kriegers.
Okay, you're just jealous that he stole the show because he's like 15 and he did more than you did. Come on. She is flirting? No. I hope she's not flirting. However, I hope she's not flirting because he's 15. He's 15. She better not be flirting. Okay?
Kriegers. They think we're lacking in faith or conviction because we don't die as often as they do.
Yeah, you're just
He
jealous,
said with
bro.
a sneer. Emiliana frowned at that, looking first at Gregor and then at 1313. Is that true? Do you really believe that? She asked him.
What are you going to say to
He
the pretty
paused
lady?
before answering, as if considering the question. This was probably the longest he had ever spent interacting with people who were not from his homeworld, and honestly, it was also one of the chattiest interactions he had ever been party to. But being chatty didn't make one unfaithful or speak to their conviction, and obviously, it only made sense that there would be faithful beyond the boundaries of Krieg.
Yeah, logic.
After all, Krieg had sinned, and they had not. But more than anything else, he reflected on what he had seen and experienced in their company. No, he said, adding no more. Jackna smiled and raised her eyebrows, and Horston, one of the men wielding a flamer, chuckled into his hands as he crouched over his bar, eating silently as the conversation went on around him. Well, see that? Emiliana said brightly. We must not be so bad.
Yeah.
Gregor rolled his eyes, but did not contradict her and went back to his food. 1313 looked back down at his bar and then heard the woman next to him chuckle. Looking over, he almost leaned back and away as Emiliana leaned in towards him,
what are you doing?
close
Honey,
as she
honey,
reached
honey,
for the ration
honey.
bar in his hand. Here, let me, she said, taking the plastic pin and yanking it for him.
She has to
The
be
packet
joking,
heated
right?
and inflated in his hand, but she did not pull away. Still so very
Ma'am, I'm sorry. How old are you? How old are you? This is important. Ma'am, he's 15. He's 15. Please don't do this. Please don't. Goodness. No. Oh no. Like, this would be cute if he wasn't a kid. Oh gosh.
very close to him, so close he could almost smell her through the rain and rebreather.
How can he
Balancing
smell
her
her
rifle in her
through the
lap.
rebreather? How bad does she smell?
She reached her arms around his head and undid the lowest of the buckles which secured his mask.
Ma'am, you don't do that.
1313 sat
Don't take
like a
off his-
statue, feeling an odd, human sensation flush through him. His stomach tightened, his face felt
Please. I can't. Oh gosh, this is...
hot, but
It doesn't matter about what the Imperium says. In here, we follow a very specific set of rules. So, I am sure the Imperium does to some extent, but it doesn't matter. We're not gonna... Oh gosh. Okay, we're gonna see where this goes. I am hoping she is 17. Please be 17. Please be 17, ma'am.
he did not move an inch, trained to hold fast in the face of anything resembling fear. She pulled up on his mask, and he almost dropped his heating protein bar to stop her,
He's
but
like,
she seemed to
"I'm
notice
afraid.
and
I
shushed
don't
him,
think you are,
only
sir."
pushing the mask up
Oh,
far
gosh.
enough for his mouth to be exposed. There, she said, drawing away, taking her rifle back into her hands. He gave her a hesitant nod, almost flinching when the packet in his hands popped and began venting steam, his head snapping round to eye it. Jackna grinned and Julian laughed, while Gregor spat to the side like he had just tasted something bad.
Careful, Corporal.
Gregor kind of likes her, though. That's why he's so pissed.
Said Julian.
Oh, God.
Kriegers ain't trained to handle that kind of battle.
Oh, my gosh. Oh, no. Oh. Oh, no. Oh, no. Oh, gosh. Is it... She knows what she's doing. Oh my gosh, ma'am. Yeah, I don't think most Kriegers know about that. I'm sure they're aware. Have they experienced it? No, probably not. Oh my gosh. What the heck? Stop it, stop. I'm going to bonk all of you. Stop it, stop. No, guys. Oh no. Mods, why? No, that was me. I killed that comment. I did that. No, stop it. Oh my gosh. Okay, we're saying I'm uncomfy. I really need her to be 17. Then I can be like, oh, look, a cute little relationship. And then I can be okay with it. But I can't right now.
Upon hearing that, 1313 felt a true blush color
Sorry, I
his
bonked my
face
mic.
for the first
Sorry.
time in years, and he brought the bar up to his mouth, tearing the packaging away with his teeth and spitting it before starting to eat. Emiliana smiled wickedly at her comrade and shrugged.
She's done
I
this
have
before.
no idea
She's done this
whatsoever what
before.
you could possibly mean. Look sharp, said the squad sergeant.
Ma'am.
He had been away at a meeting with other members of the command staff, and now came back into the circle unexpectedly, geared and standing as if ready for battle. No one needed to hear or see any more to get ready, tightening armor, checking weapons, and standing all at once. They coming back already?
No, so I will say, seeing the image of a 15-year-old having like the first crush, like that is adorable. I just don't like how forward she is. I'm like, I don't know how old she is. It makes me a little weird, but I find it hilarious that he's getting like his first little crush. It's adorable. I love it. Yeah, she's not in her teens. I know. I want her to be so I can feel better about it, but dang. Yeah, she's a corporal. She is not 17.
Asked Gregor. Yeah, and with a hell of a lot of friends, said the sergeant, a squat, thickly built man named Vetnex, though called Vet for short. Vet tossed Gregor a pair of binoculars, and the big man wasted no time in coming to stand on the logs to look over the new barricades and trenches which had been built. The sight made him spit and curse. Emperor's fecking teeth, he said, coming down and handing Emiliana the binoculars. 1313 went to stand beside her, and though she still used the binoculars, she barely needed them at all. Nearly 2/4 of the defending force had survived the retreat, and what was coming back was well over 3 times that number. So massive a force that they were plainly visible as an indistinct horde of white, even through the distance rain and flashing of lightning. What's the plan, Sergeant? Asked Emiliana, eyes transfixed as she watched.
There is no way for us to kill that many replicae, even dug in. They outnumber us 10 to 1,
said Jackna. We're pulling back across the bridge, and there's no point in just dying here, said Gregor. Aw, come on. We can hold them until more guys arrive, said Julian, punching Gregor's shoulder. All of you, quiet down, snapped the sergeant. We have been conferring with the Death Corps, and they have let us in on the larger strategy. Major Lazarus is leading the rest of his forces through the connecting passageways that the clones have been using to retreat. He plans to come up behind their lines, kill their crews, and destroy their artillery. But for that to work, he needs an Emperor damn distraction, concluded Gregor.
Yeah.
The sergeant nodded. It ain't a glamorous job, but it's our job. Once we see his signal, we can begin retreating back across the bridge. But until that happens, we have to not only hold, but fight hard enough that all they can see is us. You lot got that? The Cadians snapped to salute at the words. Sir, yes, sir, they said together. All right, then get ready. 5 minutes. Take care of what you can, then meet right here to find out where you are going. Eat if you can, shit if you can't, but don't be late. Go get on with it, said Vet before going back the way he had come. 1313 watched on, and when the speaking was done, turned back to see the sluggish tide of white moving towards them. He wondered briefly if they were taking their time because they were confident in victory, or because their comms being down truly slowed them by that much. He didn't break his gaze as Emiliana began to speak from beside him. How many of them do you think are out there? She asked. He shrugged his shoulders, but then, after a moment, added something. 1,313, he said.
Oh, he said his name.
She asked, turning to look at him. My name, he clarified, is 1,313. She nodded slowly, but smiled after a moment.
She's gonna say it's
right,
unlucky,
13.
yeah.
Until this battle is done, you are part of my squad. Do you have a problem with that?
No, ma'am.
She
No,
asked.
ma'am. No,
He didn't
no.
respond right away. Looking at the other men of the Death Corps, most of whom were digging or expanding the trenches.
He's like, no, ma'am, you are pretty. You are pretty. I have no problem.
something he could not exactly aid in with his one arm. His brothers would tolerate him, but he was a cripple, and they would treat him as such. Perhaps it was an echo of his human origin, preserved even through the Vitae womb which birthed him. Perhaps it was merely his tired, drugged mind choosing the path of least resistance. Perhaps it was just the weakness of a 15-year-old boy. But 13 did not deny her. He merely shrugged. She slapped his right shoulder, beaming as he flinched from the blow. The blaster burned there, sending a jolt of agony through him.
All right, then load up and eat what you can while you can. I'll let the others know you are sticking around for the fight.
Yeah.
He looked at her and nodded, watching as she left to tell the others about his inclusion. 13 didn't know how he felt about
Gregor
the
is
decision he had
pissed.
just made. But as his eyes moved back to the mass of white-clad soldiers coming over the barren hills, he began to doubt that it would matter. Dying among the Corps, or dying among the Cadians, it made little difference.
I don't think
Death
you're gonna die,
would be
buddy.
inevitable. Death was his destiny.
No,
Unless,
it's not.
of course, the God Emperor chose otherwise.
Ooh. Bah. Is that the episode? Yeah! Yay! One more? No, we can't do one more. The next one is the... no, we can't. We can't. I have things to do. No, we cannot do one more. We cannot. I'm gonna switch scenes before you convince me otherwise. Before you convince me otherwise to watch another one, I have things to do. I love that. He's 1313 is so funny. I like him. And he's unlucky for a Krieger, so 1313 is 1313 is he's unlucky for a Krieger. We'll just say that. Feel that Krieger Riz will become a new meme. Well, he didn't say much. He just was very like brave and courageous. That Krieger has as much Riz as Aurelia. That's fair. That's honestly, it's very fair. Incredibly fair and reasonable. That you're right. Can't get around that one there. Anyways, thank you all for joining today. I hope you had a lot of fun. I have someone that we can raid into. We've raided into her a couple times before. We'll do it again. August Anomaly.